SA-GEO Symposium and third SND week. This event starts at the tail end of Women's Month. And like Women's Month, we are celebrating excellence, igniting conversations, and most importantly, coordinating efforts and forming a collective approach towards a sustainable space program for national development, for national growth and development. Because when we rise by lifting each other, we rise by lifting each other up. The partnering of the SA-GEO Symposium and the SND Week is a happy coincidence, as the main objective of these national events are similarly aligned, and it allows for the sharing of resources and an opportunity for collaboration and sharing. We rise as we lift each other up. The first session is titled Forging the Future of South Africa's Space Science and Technology, and is focused on sharing South Africa's space achievements and future plans. The chairperson for this particular session is Ms. Dumisang-Mudiawole, who is the Director of Earth Observations at the Department of Science and Innovation. She is responsible for the development and implementation of programs to support South African Earth observation strategy and for promoting the development of capacity in EO. She has a special interest in supporting the development of EO solutions that can respond to environmental challenges that the country is facing. Ms. Mudiawole holds a BSc from the University of Northwest and a master's degree in remote sensing from the University of Paris. Before joining the DSI as Deputy Director, she worked as a remote sensing researcher at the CSIR and remote sensing analyst at the Institute for Satellite and Software Application, an institute of the Department of Communications and Digital Technologies. Wow. With all those achievements, we're definitely going to have a very good session. Ms. Mudiawole, please take it away.
Thank you, Program Director. Good morning. It's good to see all of you, all the new faces and the old faces all together here. It would have been nice if we all come closer so that we don't feel like the room is this empty with all the people in here. As the Program Director has already alluded, this session we will be speaking about sharing South Africa's space achievements and future planning. In this session, the speakers will highlight policy context from relevant SST policy directives, international intergovernmental engagement areas, and also achievements that will respond to the policy directives. I welcome you to the session, and the first speaker for this morning, we will have actually three speakers who are from the government and also the DSI entities, Mr. Madau, Ms. Andiswa Lisa, and Dr. Kabena Mutu. We will first start, each speaker will have 15 minutes to speak, and we will first start with Mr. Madau. Mr. Madau has more than 20 years technical and management experience in space science and technology, specifically in Earth observation systems, remote sensing applications, and geospatial technologies, coupled with experience and extensive knowledge in the development of policies, strategies, and implementing programs in those areas. Mr. Madau holds a master's degree in satellite remote sensing from the University of Paris 6, Pierre Marie Curie, France. He has worked for the Chamber of Mines of South Africa, Agricultural Research Council, Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, Group on Earth Observations, and currently he is the Chief Director for Space Science and Technology at the Department of Science and Innovation. His topic this morning will be speaking about the national policies, put them in the global and national context of space science and technology, and if possible also talk about some of the future plans that we might have for us in this industry.
Machironi. The Machironi. Dumelang, Abshir. If you're not energized, I don't know. I've been to quite a number of events, conferences, symposiums, but I've never seen such an intro. We're doing it an African way, and that's how it should be. And I would like to thank the organizers really to have brought this, band that really has made me feel being at home. So for those who are my age group, I would be saying that it's cool to be here. And I hope you didn't listen to Ms. T when she was making an introduction, because she made me feel like I'm already I'm not gonna say it, but I'm very excited to see everybody, colleagues that I've worked with for so many years. Some of them, I won't mention them. I mean, it's been more than 20 years. Some of them, we've become brothers and sisters. And we're still here today. And I think we've gained so much momentum. And I know that some of us are getting closer to that time when we feel like we want to go back to the village. But this is an amazing village that we've built over the years. And I just hope that we're going to continue. So I've been given a role to just, give you a brief background about, where we're coming from and where we wish to be in the next 20 years. The plan that we're working on, it's beyond 20 years, but I'll just share with you some of the initiatives and the plans that we have. But I need to give you the background. Why is it so relevant? And why the government, through the Department of Science and Innovation, Department of Science and Technology, then we decided that we should really invest. And this comes from a few years back, 2008, when that conversation in the mid-2000s had begun to say, how do we resuscitate our space program? For those who might not know, the then government, of course, had a space program, which of course was very much geared on other intentions at the time. And therefore, we said at the DSI we would like to resuscitate the program because we believe that we do have the capacity, we do have capabilities, and the human resources for us to build a program that's viable, that's sustainable, that's going to contribute to the developmental state of the country, as well as ensuring that we create opportunities for everyone in South Africa. So as government, through the DSI, we set up NEOS, the Space Secretariat, which, by the way, the Secretariat was created a few years back, and it was hosted by the CSR, and then, of course, it was migrated back to the DSI, and it's back to the CSIR, showing how agile we are. We're not as rigid as you would think, but we move with times, and when it's necessary, we do acknowledge that there can be improvement in what we are trying to do, what we're trying to achieve, and therefore you would have noted that the Secretariat is back at the CSIR. The Secretariat has been created really to create a collaborative platform that will ensure that government entities, academia, research agencies, industries, NGOs. Of course, we like to talk about NGOs. We haven't got there yet, and we need to begin to look at how we bring the NGOs as well. But as we do that, one of the most important challenges that we're facing, and that I want to say to everyone here, given that most of us have this technical background, which is scientific, engineering, and so on, that the role and the importance of the relevance of the social sciences and humanities, it's something that we need to take seriously so that we can begin to understand the societal challenges that we're facing and ensure that as we build these solutions and products and services, these are services that are responding to our understanding of what the societal challenges are. Through the implementation of the National Space Policy and the strategy, which of course also gave birth to the South African Earth Observation Strategy, we intend to contribute to key government imperatives. This is the National Development Plan at the highest level, but we have recently seen that we've been challenged by the presidency to begin to look at what we call the district development model. The district development model, it's there to ensure that we do not leave anyone behind. And therefore, how do we begin to ensure that there's an alignment from national, provincial, to a local government in our development efforts. We also want to look at creating a platform that will support the growth of the domestic space industry. We would like to, actually we have quite a number of instruments within the DSI that are looking at supporting small, medium, micro enterprises, startups, to ensure that there's transformation as well as inclusive growth. That for us is quite critical. And we're doing this in response to the white paper on science, technology and innovation, which the DSI took to cabinet in 2019, which was approved. And this white paper intend to drive the agenda of the science, technology, and innovation in this country. I just want to say part of what the white paper is trying to achieve is to ensure that we respond as space science and technology to the Sustainable Development Goals. We believe that science, technology, and innovation is a driver of economic growth, job creation, addressing one of the biggest challenges that we're facing in this country, that of inequality. We believe that through the applications that we're developing as the space community, we would be able to address some of this. We also believe that the white paper, through the science, technology, and innovation, will ensure that we begin to look at new technological solutions that can help address some of the challenges that we're facing in the food security domain. You might have seen or learned what's happening in the Horn of Africa as we're sitting here. What's the role of space science and technology in ensuring that we do assist in food security? We know the challenge that we face in the country, the energy security. How are we going to ensure that we contribute to that? The disaster risk reduction, you've noted, here in South Africa, the flooding events that we've experienced in the past couple of years. You've seen globally what's happening right now in Pakistan, where there's a loss of lives through the flooding that's happening. And therefore, we need to begin to look at, of course, what we do locally, but also look at how we can contribute to the region. We're working on the SEDEC Regional Space Program. We want to contribute to the Pan-African Space Program because we believe that's where the opportunities for the industry, for our key stakeholders in the country, where they can also capture and have and create more opportunities for business as well as for growth. I just want to point that as part of our response to the Decadal Plan, which is our mechanism that is going to implement the white paper on science, technology and innovation, one, we want to ensure that we transform the STI, we transform the human resources, we strengthen the research enterprise, as well as expanding the partnership and linkages through science diplomacy, both locally as well as globally. But how do we intend to respond to that as the space community? We would ensure that we create an environment that allows us to foster research and support industrial development in space sciences and technologies. Of course, partnering with academia, as I said, research agencies, and the private sector. We would like to support new SMEs, of course, targeting youth and women through what we call dedicated instruments, such as the National Earth Observation Frontiers, such as the funding mechanism that we have put within the NEOS, and also develop applications and services that respond to government priorities as well as societal challenges. But these has to be applications, products and services that are impactful, that can be measured, that can also demonstrate the return on investment. We, as the DSI, as well as the broader government, for those who have followed, of course, the National Treasury's announcements, is that in every effort that we'll be embarking on as the DSI, we would like to support or fund all these initiatives as an investment. And therefore, we expect that in all these programs, initiatives, or flagships that we will be embarking upon, that you need to build a very strong business case that will demonstrate that the people of this country would, of course, get the return on their investment. I just want to also share with you a few initiatives that we've been supporting as the DSI, because this will then give you a much broader picture on where we want to go as the country. The ultimate goal is to develop a viable and a sustainable space program that will ensure that everybody benefit and that everybody participate in this. We've mapped up a value chain that looks at the entire space application from the upstream all the way to the ground segment. And there have been a number of initiatives. You've heard about the Space Infrastructure Hub, which hopefully the acting CEO of SANSA will say much more about that. As government, we're very committed to building the Space Infrastructure Hub, which is looking at quite a number of areas, but all the thematic areas as outlined by National Space Strategy. We have started looking at telecommunication, and this is critical in ensuring that the issues that I've referred to, food security, education for the future, health, innovation, and all these applications that we can begin to look at satellite communication. And we're looking at a significant investment. We're working with entities as well with the Department of Digital Communications and Technologies to put together a blueprint or strategy that's going to drive national satellite communication for the country. We are also looking at how we then enhance our Earth observation program. You would hear more, of course, this week with the intentions that we have with NEOS in building these communities. We are responding to the oceans economy. We have built the maritime domain awareness satellite constellation. We intend to continue with the building of that. You will know that we launched 3 of those this year. The intention is that we want to build a full constellation going forward. And that will represent also a significant investment. We want to also invest on teleport services. We have our ground segments in Hartebeespoort, Sansa Space Sciences, which we think will create more opportunities again in ensuring that there's connectivity and opportunities for the digital economy. We are also looking at rapid engineering designs, what we call concurrent engineering design facility that we will be investing in to ensure that as we begin to embark on satellite build program, that we're able to deliver, because this is where the new space and the new trends, global trends are going, where the design and the build of these satellites in future has to happen in a very short space of time, and we believe that we'll be doing that. We will be investing in the deep space network. This is critical for our internationalization as we respond to this, to the white paper, the educator plan. But we also want to begin to see the foreign direct investment happening in this country, particularly in the area of space. This becomes very critical as well as for our national prestige in ensuring that we become a global space and not just an emerging space nation. And we're very excited that for the lunar mission and part of the Artemis, you might have heard of the launch that has happened, that South Africa will be one of that site that will be contributing to the deep space network, looking at the lunar as well as the Mars exploration and other deep space probe. But this is quite significant because we're looking at a huge contribution to the growth expenditure on R&D. Our target as the DSR, we hope that we'll get to 1.8 to 2% in the future, and through the space program we're going to contribute to that. Access to space is critical for us. You've seen the shift in the geopolitics over the years, and we will be looking at building our own indigenous launching capability in this country. You might have heard of the program that we've started with the UKZN, the University of KwaZulu-Natal, where we've tested, and you will hear much more this week or in these coming 2 days on the progress that we've made in of course, the hybrid, looking at the sounding rocket program, but we're also looking at the future commercial launch vehicle through the liquid rocket propulsion system. I've talked about the satellite build program. We intend to upgrade our AIT facility assembly and integration so that we can create more opportunities for youth as well as for the broader community, and grow the industry in the country. Been put under pressure by MEM, but she says, of course, I cannot leave out space weather. It's a huge investment that we've made. We're excited that we'll be launching a regional space weather center, which is going to contribute quite significantly, not just to South Africa, but to the global community. We would like to also share with you that we're excited that the President will be opening the Space Weather Center hopefully in October. So we're very excited. So I just want to leave you with this to say that we're building a space program that is going to ensure that there's inclusive growth, transformation, as well as industry that's more representative to the aspiration that we have. We have finalized our roadmap with the CSIR, working with all key stakeholders, and that roadmap is the one that's going to drive the future of our national space program. We will be looking at quite a number of key focus areas. As I mentioned, all the priority areas in terms of circular economy. We'll hear from the communities of practice and everybody that's involved in these coming 2 days. We want to also look at industry trends and drivers of change. We need to understand where we need to be going, the direction that we should be taking as a country so that we can be responsive in developing the products and the technologies as well as the capabilities. But what's critical for us is that we need to ensure that there's an integration across the entire space economy. For us, why NEOS, why the Space Agency is to ensure that we collaborate and collaborate and collaborate. I think in diversity and the immense capacity and capabilities that we have in this country, we would ensure that we do build a viable space program. And therefore, I would say to all of you, collaborate or perish. The time is gone where you think you can do this on your own, and we want to encourage everybody, industry, academia, small enterprises, established SMEs, and companies that let's work together to ensure that we build the viable space program that's going to contribute to the socio-economic development of this country. So I would like to welcome everybody and thank you for making this time to come and share with us your experiences, and we look forward to us networking and building these relationships and partnerships, and let's collaborate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Mundau. I think it was worth the extra 2 minutes that you gave me something. No, thank you for that talk. I think we are waiting, and I'm sure the industry is waiting to see that you keep to the promises that you've made here this morning. Next up, we're going to call Dr. Kevin Naidu, who's the Acting Group Executive at CSIR, also responsible for NEOS. Dr. Naidu joined the CSIR in 1999 as an aeronautical engineer within the Defense Aeronautics Program in the then Defense Tech Operating Unit. He subsequently participated and had various projects for the Department of Defense, Industry, and the CSIR in the area of computational and experimental aerodynamics. Kevin achieved the rank of principal researcher before he was appointed as the head of CSIR Aeronautics in 2013, and subsequently operations manager for Advanced Production and Security Division in 2020. He has held various other leadership roles in the organization over the years. He has led several national level efforts in aerospace on behalf of the Department of Science and Innovation, and has facilitated several dialogues on empowering growth of the sector in the region and on the continent. Dr. Naidu has also served on the International Forum for Aviation Research and Alliance of the Leaders of the World's Premier Aeronautics institutes, including the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, the German Aerospace Center, the Royal Netherlands Aerospace Center, the Japanese Aerospace Exploration Agency, and other national aerospace laboratories across the globe in a collaboration to address the world's most pressing aviation challenges. He has extensive knowledge and experience in leading and managing operations, including strategy development, stakeholder engagement, business development, capability management, and understands the intricacies of running a complex research and development business within the South African context. He holds a PhD in aeronautical engineering from the University of Witwatersrand, Johannesburg, and has completed the Executive National Security Program with the Department of Defense. Dr. Naidu is married and has 2 children. He's a family man that also is committed to space science and technology. He will be talking on promoting integrated use of EO and space for socio-economic and environmental benefit. Dr.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Program Director. I think there was a warning shot earlier about the time, so I'll just be very careful that I don't overshoot. I like to take the leaf from my previous speaker who spoke about collaborate or perish. And I think that's the theme, that's the golden thread that runs through what I'm going to speak about. So this morning I'd just like to be a little bit more specific about what I want to unpack. I'd like to unpack the NEOS program a little bit and the importance of its role in enabling the Earth observation and space ecosystem for socio-economic and environmental benefits. Thank you, Chair, for that kind introduction. Good morning, distinguished guests, delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It is really my great pleasure and honor to be with you here today as we reflect and celebrate our combined achievements in space and space science and technology, and take this opportunity to revitalize our dreams for our future in space as a country. Most of my career I spent working well within the atmosphere, but I have to say there's nothing cooler than being associated with people working in space. And I think all of you deserve a round of applause for that. There is nothing cooler than working in space. So I want to join Mr. Humbulani Madar and welcome you to the CSR ICC. It's a really world-class facility. The food is really good. I would urge you that at lunchtime, walk by the dessert table first to figure out how much to pace yourself. Right? Okay. So the CSR celebrates 76 years this year. And I so happen to have been associated with the organization for about 25 of those 76 years. Very privileged to be part of this amazing organization. And I've been privileged to see many amazing programs. There are a few of our CSR colleagues in the audience, and many of them you will see exhibiting, so I'll urge you to engage with them. They're celebrities in this space already, so they need no introduction. If I just mention, so head of the Spatial Information Systems team, Cyril Govender is here and organized in the audience, and he's done various things on OSM, APHIS, GMES Africa, which looks at decision support, aquaculture, fisheries, ship traffic monitoring, sea rescue, and various other applications. We have the census team here from CSR, which looks at nanosat payloads, synthetic aperture radar. We have Moses Cho from the Advanced Agriculture team, who's going to be speaking about, who's done amazing work in satellite imagery and precision agriculture applications. And then there's a team that's working in human settlements. So I urge you to engage with them during the session. So I've taken a little bit of a speaker's liberty in introducing my CSR team. Let me focus on what I've actually been word to speak about, which is unpacking the NEOS program and how it enables the Earth observation and space ecosystem. So I'm excited to see representatives from government, academia, and several commercial sectors in this conference today. And since the beginning of COVID, we have learned the hard way that despite the significant advances in teaming platforms and online platforms, we have really not found a way to replicate the power of collaboration and the chemistry that comes from thinking in the same space. In his book, Where Good Ideas Come From, Stephen Johnson speaks about the power of collaboration and the importance of thinking in the same space. And he cites several examples and successful innovations that come about from the serendipity and chemistry that arise from collaboration. And coming together today is essential as it takes all of us across this value chain to build a future for South Africa in space. So if I just unpack the Space Secretariat for a bit, for those of you who are not aware, the National Earth Observation and Space Secretariat, or NEOS, is an initiative of the Department of Science and Innovation. It's hosted by the CSR, and the manager of the program is Advocate Lulu Makapela. She's done a very good job of not making herself visible today. But she's in the second row from the front. She's a very humble person, so you wouldn't see her. But she's done a lot of behind the scenes to make this event happen. So she's the manager of the program, and she ought to be standing here on this podium, but she opted to put me here, so let's proceed. So there are a number of strategic national goals and priorities that NEOS hopes to achieve. And it hopes to achieve this by facilitating collaboration and coordination amongst the Earth observation and space community across the value chain. And my previous speaker spoke about collaborate or perish, and this is essentially the essence of NEOS. It facilitates collaboration and coordination. And the community that it intends to collaborate and coordinate with is decision makers, policy makers, officials from all spheres of government, national, provincial, local, municipalities and districts. It intends to bring together academia, researchers and scientists working in EO and space-related fields. It intends to bring together the commercial sector that uses or needs EO and data to develop applications, products and solutions, particularly SMMEs. It brings together professionals, practitioners, students, youth and institutions that utilize EO products and services for various needs. And most importantly, it brings together our society, the most important benefactor of the work we do. The outcomes and impacts that NEOS seek to achieve, it seeks to drive this coordination of the EO and space ecosystem to achieve the following outcomes. Enhance capacity of South African organizations and individuals to access, use and manage EO data and information. It seeks to achieve reduced duplication of efforts amongst organizations, programs, initiatives and activities. It seeks to achieve that EO data is described properly, preserved properly, discoverable and accessible when it is needed through shared infrastructure, and intends to contribute to the development of tailor-made products, services and solutions that address requirements through stakeholders such as the CSR, SANZA, DSI and others. And the long-term impact of this NEOS initiative is increased community participation, awareness and knowledge, which translates to an increased use of EO in policy making, service provision and benefits to society. So I'll speak a little bit about how it intends to do this. So it's essentially mobilization support for SA's Earth Observation, or SA-GEO, It's satellite navigations or SA-GSN and communications or SA-GSC communities. A lot of acronyms you will notice in the Earth observation community. The second thing on my list is that it manages the SA-GEOs program in collaboration with the Regional Center for Mapping of Resources for Development. And thirdly, it encourages this open, coordinated and sustainable data and infrastructure sharing for enhanced research amongst the community, policy development and decision-making action. And a particular highlight of NEOS and a note on the successes achieved to date is its ability to have developed these communities of practice and bring these communities of practice together. It has been coordinating the integration of the ecosystem through these communities of practice to share knowledge, expertise, and best practices. And since the re-establishment of NEOS in April 2021, there's been great progress to revive the South African group on Earth observation and expand the mandate to satellite communications and navigations. There are a total of 8 communities of practice, and I'll name them very briefly: agriculture and food security, climate action, circular economy and natural resource management, Earth observations infrastructure, data governance, satellite navigations and communications, and the 2 in progress of being set up at the Natural Capital Accounting and Human Settlements and Planning. And since the launch of the COPs in January 2022, a total of 100 members have been registered and engaged in the activities of these active communities. And these COPs really focus on the identifying gaps and developing the needs of users and potential users in the country, developing requirements while contributing towards building this shared common EO data infrastructure, and contributing towards existing spatial data infrastructure. I'll talk a little bit about how these COPs work, and they're really led, that's the engine room of the community. It's led by these enthusiastic members of the space industry who serve as co-chairs and chairs of the COPs. These members come from different organizations, including academia, industry, and research institutions. For those of you who don't know about the COPs, I'd urge you to contact us during the break so that you can be connected appropriately. And we are very grateful for the dedication of these members and the support that they provide, and might I add, on a voluntary basis. We're also very, very proud of the achievements in the COPs in shaping and developing their strategies, work plans, and activities for the next 3 years. And we believe that these serve as the foundation for future initiatives. In addition to the COPs and the coordination of the COPs, NEOS does I'd like to note some other important contributions that NEOS is undertaking. We're maintaining this collaboration platform to support sustainability of the COPs. We're also providing opportunities to build EO capacity through support for training and development of the community where it is needed, and we're also facilitating community outreach and the uses and benefits of EO in space. In summary, I'd like to conclude that we have lofty ambitions for NEOS. We have lofty ambitions as a country for space. We all appreciate and understand the potential of EO to most of the SDGs. I think it features in most of the 17 SDGs, including economic, environmental, social, governance, peace, justice, and security. But impact and innovation don't happen by itself. It requires coordination, it requires collaboration. And this is where NEOS is seen as the catalyst and ecosystem enabler for EO in space. We are honored that DSI has entrusted the CSR with this important responsibility of managing this program. And I'd like to just take an opportunity to just share with you the real power and importance of collaboration and coordination and serendipity. Success is always understood backwards, but very hard to predict looking forward. When I had the privilege of hosting General Charlie Bolden, who was the former head of NASA, on this very stage and he came up to me and he says, behind the scenes, he said to me, how did you end up in this aeronautics game, given the challenges in the country and where you come from and all of that? And he made me think for a while, how did it all start? And it so happens, there's a man in my life, my father, who turns 80 today. And he so happened to have worked at in the civil service in his younger years. And on the route from the bus station to his place of employment, there was the city library. And he would walk to the city library on his way home and pick up a book for me. And the books that I remembered the most were the books about the moon landing and Neil Armstrong and the efforts of mankind to reach for the stars. And that little point in my life had a major impact on the rest of it. And so I would like to emphasize how important this event is. I don't think you realize how important it is for this community and for those who don't have access to information and outreach that is needed. So thank you for the work that you're doing, DSI. Thank you for the work that you're doing, Senza, and thank you for the work that you're doing, Lulu and Nios, and wish you all the best. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Naidu, for your talk this morning. I think the highlights that came out, I think also from Mr. Madau's speech this morning, it's collaboration and coordination. And I think the commitment that NIOS is making to provide more mobilization support for the industry, I think that is most welcome. I think I urge all of you to then take advantage of all these opportunities that NIOS is is providing for us. The next speaker, the last speaker for this session, is Ms. Melissa, and she'll be giving us an address on how they implement the space strategy from the past to the future. Ms. Melissa joined SANSA as the Managing Director for Earth Observations in 2017 and is currently occupying the role of the Interim CEO at SANSA. She has vast experience spending 20 years in international intergovernment, public and private sector organizations, and covering Earth observations and space applications. During her career at SANSA since 2017, she has reshaped and enhanced the operations and delivery of exceptional products and services from the SA-GEO program, whilst also supporting the local space industry. Recently, we saw her leadership in the development of the space infrastructure business case and the hosting by SANSA of the Digital Africa program. She has authored, co-authored, and participated in numerous local and international publications and conferences. Her impressive academic record includes a Master's in Business Administration from the Gordon Institute of Business Science, MSc GIS and Remote Sensing from University of Stellenbosch, a BSc Honours Cum Laude in Applied Remote Sensing from University of Fort Hare. She has numerous professional memberships and on local and international space and Earth observation platforms, including having served in the South African Council for Space Affairs and has received awards for her contribution and leadership. Ms. Melissa sees herself as a servant and responsible leader that builds a culture of inclusivity and excellence. Let's welcome Ms. Melissa to the stage.
Our fellow keynote speakers, program director, moderator of the session, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to say it is fantastic to be here. It's good to be here. As the last time we gathered as the space community in the country was in 2019 for the second National Space Development Week. And as SANSA, we made the decision, I think NEOS also, when we re-established it, made the same decision that we're not going to have an online conference. Those of you who've attended, as most of us have attended the online conference, you know that the tools and the platforms that we've gotten to be so used to sort of like leave certain things a bit unfelt and untouched. For example, it is very difficult to actually look someone in the eye and say, "Unjani." Can't get that, you know. The wonderful conversations that we're having during tea. I saw the team this morning struggling to get you into the room because you were busy chatting like in the breakfast area and having tea. But one of my most favorite ones is the hugs. I was hugging everyone I came across this morning. Because with online, we just didn't have this feel and the touch, which is very critical when we're talking about building relationships and collaboration. We might just perish if we stay online, right? So we do need to meet in person. So thank you very much for taking the time and actually coming out together to make sure that this room is packed as is and allow us to have this engagement today. I'd like to pass a word of appreciation to the Department of Science and Innovation for the continued support, because without that support as our shareholder, we would not be here today. To the local organizing committee, under the leadership of Advocate Makapela and the support of Ms. Sangoni, we thank you very much for ensuring that we are here today. To you, ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate the patience that you have shown us as circumstances forced us to change the dates earlier this year. And your presence today and the rest of the week dininqonelela impumelelo xa nidibanisa amathambo engqondo kule veki. Best of luck as you share knowledge and build collaborations in the coming days, forging the future of South Africa's space science and technology. Because we must know, we might be standing here as the keynote speakers, but actually the tangible implementation of our national space strategy lies in your hands, not in ours. And that is what the program also shows for the next coming few days. So thank you very much for being here today and for the next days. The space economy, when we launched or published the national space strategy in 2010, at the time, the OECD had estimated the value of the space economy to be about 112 billion. This was in 2005. If you look at the Space Foundation report, currently the space economy is estimated at 447 billion. This is in 2021. This is 55% higher than a decade ago in terms of the value. The commercial space revenue has grown about 6.6% in 2020, going above 356 billion rands. We're seeing launches happening every day. Sadly, the Artemis launch did not happen as it was planned this week. But we will get there. These are the things that happen. Now we see 85 nations operate in space. 85 nations operate in space. If you look at the OECD report in terms of what the investments that governments are making in space, the recent report, you will see that if we look at the percentage of GDP, the United States is the leading, obviously. 2.5%, 0.25% of the GDP of the United States is towards the space. This is followed by Russia, our BRICS fellow partner, at 0.2%. China just about touches 1%. And we find South Africa at about just below 0.01%. But we're also going to see that we are growing in this arena. So I'm talking about percentages. Maybe let's try to put it in numbers. So the 0.25% that is put into the space economy for the US, we're talking billions of US dollars. For South Africa, we're still striving to have about $1 billion a year. We're still at less than $1 billion a year. But we're going to talk about the future as well. The South African National Space Agency mandate is anchored around the National Space Strategy. as well as the policy. Dr. Modau here mentioned that the policy mechanisms in the country also now includes the decadal plan that the Department of Science and Innovation is putting in place, which gives us the framework on how, within the national space of innovation, we should thrive to contribute to the recovery of our economy in the country, as well as the betterment of society at large. I think we underestimate the fact that for us to say we have had an impact in space, we need to know that we've actually improved people's lives. When we talk about the triple challenge that the country faced, I tend to think sometimes we use this as simply as words. When we talk about inequality, we need to look around this room and talk about accessibility. How many of our people are not able to be with us in this room? They aspire to, but they just do not have the capability and the privilege to actually have made it as far as we have made it. By the way, I am coming from the rural village of Tsala in the Eastern Cape. We still do not have running water. Every time when I go home in December, I still have to go and fetch water with buckets. There's still no real electricity connections. But opportunities come and you grab the opportunities and you land in a space like this one. So our mandate sits within the National Space Agency Act. This mandate, as I've already mentioned, is informed by the National Space Strategy. SANSA celebrates 11 years this year because we were established in 2010. However, our space heritage as the country goes for decades before that. So we could not say at any given point that our heritage or what we know in space is only 11 years old. It goes way further. I am hoping that Dr. McKinnon, when she gives her keynote speech, she will tell you that for where we're coming from in terms of where we are today with the Space Weather Center that we will be launching, as Dr. Modau said, with the president in the room. The research that has taken us to where now we can say we are operational and providing an operational service to the continent and the international community on space weather started over 8 years ago. And we realize operationalization now. So this investment in the heritage has been long there. The National Space Strategy outlines 4 thematic areas: Earth observations, communications, navigation, positioning and timing, as well as space exploration. If you look closely at the NEOS communities of practice, you will find that those 8 are actually anchored around these 4 broad thematic areas for the country. We've also outlined in the National Space Strategy what are the building blocks that we must put in place: human capital, industry support, infrastructure, as well as international partnerships. We're back again on that collaboration. At the bottom of all of this is the foundation. It is driven by the user needs. Back then, when this National Space Strategy was being put in place, a number of government departments were invited into the room and the question was asked, what are your pain points? From the understanding of the pain points, from security to tourism, actually even National Treasury was in the room. We came up with 3 broad thematic areas that our National Space Strategy should drive, and that forms what you would call user requirements today. Our vision for SANSA in driving for the implementation of the National Space Strategy, we're looking for an integrated space capability. I'm going to say this again, an integrated space capability. With integrated, we're actually saying all of us together. It's not the capability that SANSA must have, it's the capability that as a country we must have, from research to industry, collectively. This capability must respond to socio-economic challenges. It mustn't be because the technology is nice. It mustn't be because the technology gives us prestige. It mustn't be because when you tell someone you work for the National Space Agency, they think you're the brightest star in the room. I get that a lot, and I don't say no. I say yes, I am. But actually, we're doing this because we want to ensure that we improve people's lives. We must be able to use this technology in a manner that we can answer when the portfolio committee asks us, how is it that today, in this day and age, actually they don't ask it this question, I ask this question this way. How is it that in this day, with the technology that we have in our hands, we can still see the level of impact that has happened in UKZN in April and May over the floods? lives were lost. Livelihoods were lost. And yet we say we hold a powerful technology in our hands. Something somewhere is missing. We have a number of strategic outcomes that we have outlined, and I'm not going to go through this. I would ask you to just take time to read through our strategy as SANSA, which is available online. But we start by talking about ensuring that we increase the space-relevant knowledge. We stimulate growth and inclusive space sector, increase human capital for the implementation of these space initiatives. And we position SANSA as a key enabler when it comes to enabling government's priorities being implemented. We need to ensure that we've got an enabling infrastructure for this to happen. And again, we must make sure that we collaborate through our national and international partnerships. So a quick glance through the infrastructure aspects. So I'm going to talk about the 4 pillars that enable us to deliver on these thematic areas. If you're looking at our infrastructure landscape, as SANSA, and you might have seen this in the NEOS video, that video is wonderful, don't you agree? It's just, you know, when we talk about an integrated space capability, when you see it in a video like that, from the launching capability that the colleagues at UKZN are working on, to the Space Weather Center, to the ground infrastructure that's sitting, to the data portals that actually hold the geospatial information that we're working with, and you see it all consolidated in a 5-minute video, it is impactful. I hope Ululu is going to share that video throughout so that you can also use it in your own space. Back in 1961, we set up a 12-meter antenna in what we now call our Space Operations Center in Hartbeespoort. I think there's a talk tomorrow that's going to give you more details. Since 1961, we've seen our capabilities increase. Now, if you look at our space operations, you would not recognize it from 1961 to what it is today, because it is a field of antennas, ensuring that we're not only supporting the South African community in terms of checking satellites that help us get the data that we use, like Landsat, Sport, but actually to also provide an international service to those who launch satellites and to those who actually also want to track and download their data. We don't talk much about our satellite launching capability, because if we do tell you the kind of things that we do, then we might have to kill you, and we do not want to do that. We've seen a launch of a number of satellites as well. Sunset as being one of them, Sumbandila set, and a various number, including the CubeSats that we have just been celebrating coming out of the university, out of Cape Peninsula University. So there's a long chain from 1961 to where we're at in 2021. And we've built this space infrastructure capability not only just on what you see in terms of our ground station, but also the capability that's behind what we see in front. I mean, when you look at the Space Weather Center, you see the front office, but you do not see the instrumentation network that actually feeds the models that actually we can then use to put out. An instrumentation network that now even goes as far as the African continent as a whole. The Earth observations community will also be aware that our sensor portfolio is very broad. Utumisang is telling me my time is up, and I'm telling him, hello. I'm talking about the past and the future, so I'm getting to the future just in a few slides, please, Tumisang. Our sensor portfolio is very broad, and you would know this because you are actually one of our major users when it comes to this. But we've seen it over the years, supporting from sensors to your environmental affairs and our Department of Agriculture in terms of whether it's land cover or the electrification for ESCOM in the country. And we're continuously looking together to ensure that we actually improve on the delivery. But one of the things that's starting to also bubble up in this current phase we're in the implementation is the development of data cubes. Please do visit the Digital Earth Africa booth outside so that you can experience the power of a data cube. And tomorrow there is a talk that is talking on Digital Earth South Africa. I'll do just one slide, please. So Mr. Mudau, when he gave us a number of initiatives that we are looking for going into the future, he intentionally, I will say, did not mention a figure when he was talking in terms of all of these initiatives, what do they actually amount to. So at the beginning, I gave you a snapshot that currently we're not even investing $1 billion a year in our space, in our space environment, even though we had envisaged to be doing such when we set up the National Space Program. The establishment of the Deep Space Network ground station in Manchesfontein, the Space Infrastructure Hub, the telecommunications satellite, the data cubes, the Space Weather Center, the upgrade of the house tech facility so that we can continue to have this prestigious capability in the country to make sure that we can build and test our own satellites, the teleport services, the data visualization, the ground segment that we have, the Neo Frontiers grant service, which I'm hoping somewhere there's a talk around this as well. All of these amounts to about 14 billion within the time frame of the implementation of those projects. In the past, the SANSA budget was 150 million. Now we're at about 250 to 350 million a year. The future we're looking at is taking us to billions, totaling over the span of the project's implementation to 14 billion. I would like to dare say that such a future is one that we all want to be part of. And therefore, thank you very much for forging this. I do still have a lot to say, by the way, around our implementation. And I was given more than this time when I was preparing my speech, but now, because you guys want to go to tea break. So I would still like, if you want to have a conversation, especially talking about the HCD, what we do in human capital development, how we focus on empowering women, specifically within our bursaries. In 2016, we were funding 33%. By now, our bursary percentage that goes to women is 47%. We need to be very intentional about how we implement our national space strategy. Our industry development, the pipeline that is sitting with Neo Frontiers, which is a call for proposals that we put out. Go to the NRF website for that, because I think there is a call that's out already. That's 60 million over 5 years that you can apply for. We only ask for one thing. Make sure that the consortium forms of an SME, that is industry, research or academia, government or non-for-profit. What does this have? It's called the value chain. From research to operations for a specific user. Fit for purpose. If your consortium meets this, please do respond to the calls. Thank you very much. I could have spoken for even longer. Masutu Misaki is gone.
Yeah. Thank you. The moderator has disappeared because of other commitments. But I'm sure we would ask the program director to come. But I just want to thank the speakers as a moderator, Ms. T. Not Ms. T, but I just want to take this opportunity to thank my colleagues from SANSA and the CSR. And then I think I'll hand back to the capable program director. But thank you very much.
Sure, that was an amazing presentation. I think what I loved about it the most is that we're reflecting back at the work we've done and then looking forward at what still needs to be done. Some of the take-home messages are: be intentional in the implementation of the National Space Program. Collaborate or perish. The time to work on your own is over. We have lofty ambitions as a country and for space. Impact doesn't happen by itself. It's through collaboration, serendipity, and sharing of information and implementation that we can alleviate challenges such as poverty, inequality, job creation, and food security. Those are some of the tweetable moments. Please tweet us, link with us on LinkedIn and on Facebook. The hashtag is SA-GEO 2022, hashtag SND 2022. And we will resume our session at 11:15. Thank you. She has led and has been a member of various local, regional, and international technical committees such as the International Standard Organization, ISO, Working Group on ISO 1944, Land Cover Meta-Language since 2019 to present, co-chair of the African Land Degradation Neutrality 2019 to present, member of the African Land Cover Technical Committee, responsible for SADC region 2015 to present, advisory panel on research peer review for National Research Fund on the New Frontier Earth Observation 2021 to present, committee member of the South African Committee on Spatial Information and chairperson of the Standard Subcommittee 2014 to 2020, as well as executive member of the African Association of Remote Sensing of the Environment 2015 to 2018. She believes that collective action and shared ownership for women's equality is what will make women empowerment impactful. Yes. Wow. Sure. We have an amazing session chair, and she has extensive information and knowledge. Please help me welcome our session.
Thank you, Program Director. The second session after tea break will be having few speakers as they have been introduced. And I think we are following on what has been discussed in the morning by our keynote speakers. As you can see that our focus for this session, it goes to issues of governance, policies, and providing the direction. And I think our keynote speakers this morning have provided that kind of a direction for us. We are now looking at how then do we implement what we have discussed, or what gives us the direction in terms of this South African agenda in space. So for us to do that, I will be asking Dr. Lee-Ann McNeil to then provide us with her first presentation, and then we will have some questions. We do have Slido, and I will request everybody to log in on Slido, and you can drop a question there for our speakers, and we will address that later on as we go on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair and Program Director, and good afternoon, colleagues and members of the space industry community. It gives me great pleasure to be here today to discuss space weather in the planning, policy and decision-making context. And I must say before I start that I was thrilled this morning because nearly every speaker had something that mentioned the word space weather, and this means that I can retire happy, because a few years ago I was the only person talking about space weather, but now, hey, so that means my job is almost done. I'm going to first of all, I'm going to start off because I realize that some people in the audience might be saying, what is this thing called space weather? And so I'm going to very quickly take you on a journey through what is space weather, and then why is it a national risk, and why should we be taking it into account when we do policy planning and decision making. Now, I just have to get the technical stuff right. Okay, this is not moving. Help? Coming? Help is coming? Thank you. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Of course, if you want to solve a problem, always call the cavalry. The minute they arrive, the problem goes away. Right. Right, so what is space weather? So space weather refers to the conditions on the sun and in the space between the Earth and the sun that can influence the performance and reliability of technological systems. So basically, space weather is when as the sun explodes, sends that explosion towards Earth, and the Earth's shield, which is the magnetic field, is interacted with, and that interaction then impacts our technological systems. And I'm sure you can all agree that technological systems are something we cannot do without. Is there anybody here today who does not have a cell phone with them, for example? Or who didn't log into the Wi-Fi this morning the minute they walked through the front door? Who used a GPS to get here today? Those are all the things that can be impacted by space weather. It's a natural phenomenon. We cannot stop it. All we can do is we can know about it, we can understand it, we can grow our knowledge around it, and then we can forecast and predict what will happen and then enable decision makers. And I'll talk more about that just now. Why is it important? Just one more thing before I get off this slide. The picture that you see in the slide, if you can remember nothing else, what you can remember from that is when the sun sneezes, the earth catches cold. And we need to watch out for that. And the mitigation that we take is the flu medicine to stop the earth from catching cold. So technology. Technology is, as I mentioned, playing an increasing, ever important role in our society and in our daily lives. And technology throughout our lives is being impacted by space weather. And the reason we're more interested now in the impact than we were, say, 20 years ago is because our dependence on technology has grown to such an extent that we miss it when it's not there, and it can impact not only our convenience of life, but it can also impact safety of life, and that's very crucial. Space weather is on the rise nationally and globally, and in fact, space weather is a global phenomenon. We all look at the same sun, but the impacts are regional, and so that's why we need to be sure to monitor it globally and also the impact regionally. So the economic impact, and this is a policy planning decision-making session, right? So we need to talk about what would be the economic impact of being hit by a space weather solar storm. And the economic impact is far-reaching. We normally classify storms as minor, moderate, and extreme, and on the slide I have moderate and extreme indicated here. The different, and some examples, and these are just examples of where we can have an impact. So your satellite technology, the cost of engineering and the loss of applications. Of course, satellite technology, you develop your technology to go into space. Space is where space weather is happening. So if your spacecraft is not space hardened or does not have the technology integrated to protect it from space weather, you're going to end up increasing the risk of loss of that satellite. Energy. The energy sector is very is a big impact on the energy sector from space weather up to widespread blackouts. And from a moderate storm, you're looking at something close to 600 million rand in losses, and it goes up that. Recovery could be 4 to 5 years because the impact on the energy sector is in infrastructure impact. And the energy infrastructure that brings us our power is very hard to reproduce, and we need to order it to spec. Communications and navigations, this is one that we've spent a lot of time on because communication and navigation is integrated into many things we do, from banking to finding our way, to landing and taking off with our planes. And the loss of a global navigation satellite system capability would impact all of those arrangements. I'm going to show you some more examples about GNSS outage just now because a lot of case studies have been done around it. But it has been proven that a GNSS outage could cost the US up to $1 billion in a day. Which can have devastating social and economic repercussions. So the security sector is mostly hit by HF radio communications blackout, and it can affect safety of our citizens as well. Then the transport sector can suffer severe economic repercussions from the aviation sector, which I'll also talk about just now. The rail sector and the maritime sector can all be impacted, mostly through the impact of the loss of GNSS. So space weather is also the message I want you to get from here, is that something that we need to consider when we're looking at our planning and policy development. This is just a follow-on slide to that shows the interdependence we have on space weather. So if you look down here, you've got banking and finance, affects a number of other things that we do. Emergency services are affected, transportation, the electric power system, oil and gas, so your fuel supply, your communications end office, your water, all of it is interconnected. And so if you have a loss in navigation applications, you may not be able to take off in your aircraft, but you also may not be able to do your banking or get your medical supplies where you need them to be. So just an example, this is a study I mentioned, space weather and GNSS. So global navigation satellite systems, there's been a lot of work done in this. And GNSS is our friend and our foe. So it's our friend in the sense that we get data from the GNSS systems, we use it for navigating. But if something happens to that system, we are also then at the mercy of space weather, and we can then not go about our daily lives. And as I've reported, there was a study that found that GNSS outage, or GPS in the US outage, could cost the country up to $1 billion per day. So it's something to take care of. Space weather is a national risk. So one of the things we've been looking at is how do we put space weather forward as a national risk, and we've looked to the UK for an example of how they have done this. The UK was the first country in the world to list space weather on the National Risk Register in a higher category than volcanoes. This space weather has also been listed as a global challenge, so many countries are looking at where does it appear on the National Risk Register. If you look at the overall relative impact score, which is on the y-axis here, the impact score can be based on fatalities, injuries or illness, social disruption, economic harm, and psychological impact. And space weather is sitting with a 1 in 20 and 1 in 2 likelihood of occurrence on the National Risk Register in the UK. Several other countries have come on board now and put space weather as a risk on their National Risk Register, and there's many mitigation techniques that are coming into play now. So it's something for us to think about. Okay, another sector that has taken space weather extremely seriously is the aviation sector. And the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, have now passed compliance recommendations, it was a recommendation, it's now a requirement, compliance requirements that ensure that space weather phenomenon relevant to the whole flight route has been added to the information to be provided by flight vendors and operators. So when you get your flight documentation, the same way that you would get terrestrial weather, you now need to get space weather. But the difference is that your space weather also has to be transmitted to the cockpit, because during a flight, space weather could change. And so the pilot needs to be well informed on the whole route. We also, as a designated space weather center, need to be able to provide information on a continuous basis, covering navigation applications, satellite communications, high-frequency communications, and also radiation exposure at flight levels that could increase as a result of the solar storm. The ICAO compliance, they designated several centers, 5 centers globally, and South Africa was one of those centers. South Africa was designated as the regional center for Africa to provide space weather information to the aviation sector, ensuring that the African aviation sector remains ICAO compliant. Implementation for the global centers started in November 2019, and we will start providing that information to the aviation sector from November 2022. Right, so just a summary, sectors affected that need to take this into account include energy, transport, maritime, rail, aviation, defense from a security aspect, mining, so precision mining and precision agriculture as well for that matter, communications, HF and satellite, and then any utilization of navigation and positioning applications. So if you develop anything that requires navigation or positioning or communication systems on board, for example, a navigation system on board a satellite, you're going to be impacted by space weather. Right, so SANSA, and you've heard several mentions of the space weather operational capability in the Space Weather Center. SANSA has been involved in space weather globally on an international scale since 2007. We have built our first Space Weather Center in 2010, which was a limited focus research and development center, and we also upgraded it in 2018. And in 2018, we were designated as the space weather information provider for aviation. We then started a three-year project, which will come to its conclusion in October. And in October, we will be launching the 24/7 Operational Space Weather Center, which will provide information in all the categories that I've mentioned on a 24/7 basis. As a designated centre, we are ICAO compliant. We are also able to provide those services to a number of other sectors. And in doing this and pushing this forward, we've also had to develop some policies. We've also had to talk to policymakers and to government around how do we mitigate the risk of space weather, how do we bring it in when we do decision making, etc. And that has been an extremely interesting exercise. We also have to work with users for user interpretations. So what ICAO found was that making space weather a compulsory necessity for your flight path didn't mean that your pilots were automatically experts in space weather interpretation. So now there has to be training and there has to be directives in terms of what is necessary, thresholds, what are the principles we need to apply in ensuring that the aviation sector can mitigate this risk and understand the information. And this applies to many other sectors as well. So, as a designated regional space weather information provider, we have committed to provide the right information in the right format, at the right time, to the right people, to enable and facilitate the right decisions. And that's why decision making, taking space weather into account, is incredibly important, as well as making sure that we have the policies and the regulations that govern how we mitigate against this risk. There are two policy briefs that, if you're interested in the policy side of this, you might be interested to look at, that we published a few years ago. The one is the space weather impacts on aviation. It deals directly with the aviation sector. The other is the economic impact of space weather, which covers what I mentioned in the first few slides on the economic impact of rail, maritime, aviation, etc. And the energy sector is also covered in there. So they are very interesting and useful short information leaflets that allow you to understand and determine whether or not you need to be worried about space weather. Thank you very much, and I guess tomorrow I'll be covering more of the technical details around the space weather aspects. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Leanne. I'm not going to take questions now. We're going to do the presentation for all speakers and then we can engage later on. I will be now calling Dr. Joel Botai from South African Weather Service, and he will be talking about the use and inspired application in research at South African Weather Service.
So, thanks a lot, Chair, and I have to say that the last speaker, I've known her actually for a long time. It's the first time to see her after 15 years. I was her student, a master's student then, and when she speaks of space weather, I think we are in unison, we understand each other. And I have to say that the organizing committee, we appreciate to invite Souls to give a talk on what I call use-inspired application research at the South African Weather Service. So before I delve into the exact applications or products that exist at the South African Weather Service for policy planning, I'd like us to just look at this research and development program that we have at the South African Weather Service. So the Weather Service has a research department that is comprising of 7 pillars, actually more than 7 pillars, but the most important ones are observation research, weather research, climate change and variability research, applications research, air quality, market intelligence, disaster risk reduction, and marine research. It's important to emphasize the role of market intelligence, that the South African Weather Service has a dual mandate to provide public good services, but also create tailor-made products for commercial use. And that is why we have market intelligence within the research department. But in terms of the knowledge production and delivery, we utilize a number of observations, that is ground observations, as well as space observations, that is remote sensing, and then capture that into some kind of modeling, forecasting, and service delivery. All these integrated process requires that we use big data. Of course, there is an aspect of storage and archiving and pre-processing in order to create value. So, in the context of the present discussion here, I felt it important to demonstrate the number of remote sensing products that we have. So we utilize observing satellites to create those products. So the first one is what we call thunderstorm table. Here we translate thunderstorm nowcasts into a system that automatically analyzes the likelihood of impact for a particular point of interest. And you can see the figure below that a number of pointer, but it's not showing. But basically, we see that this product is important for aviation, for energy sector, for construction, mining, as well as schools. And this product has also been converted into commercial use. The second product is what we call impact-based storm nowcast, which is developed specifically for aviation, and utilize impact-based nowcasts. For example, the OR sample, and this product is developed using machine learning algorithms, so that you combine both impact data and radar observations in order to create some thresholds for the aviation sector. And there are a number of other sectors that we utilize that for, including the ports, as well as schools, actually. Sorry about that. So the third product is what we call the lightning alert system, and this alert system provides alerts for specific point of interest based on the proximity of lightning within certain customized buffers around a point of interest, and this gives you threshold. And you know, it's based on color, where green color tells you that the impact is not immediate, but as you go, as the thunder approaches to the point of interest, it turns into red. And that gives you some kind of early warning. So the green ring, lightning within 10 to 15 kilometers, the yellow ring is within 5 to 10 kilometers, while the red one is at 5. But you can change this, and this is important for schools, golf courses, aviation, the mining sector, sports and recreation, energy, construction, rail. So we also have a lightning prediction model, which utilizes that's called a lightning prediction model, providing the probability of forecast of areas where the lightning is likely to occur. The forecast is available a day in advance and updated every morning, actually. And this product is important for the aviation sector, mining, sports and recreation, the construction sector, as well as the energy sector. In terms of climate change and variability, we have developed what we call the 72-hour discomfort index. And this discomfort index is a forecast product that provides 72 hours in advance warning in terms of, or in the form of maps that show what percentage of the population will be affected by the heat stress, particularly during hot seasons. And it's important to mention here that this product has been adopted by the health sector. In fact, the Department of Health has used this product to inform the health action, the heat health action plan for the country. In addition to that, we also have future malaria transmission projections, and we have a postdoc that is currently working on this product, and it will be automated in the coming 6 months. In the agriculture sector, we have what we call the heat stress index for livestock, And this can be used to manage the impact of stress on livestock. And this is a product that is operational currently at the South African Weather Service. It's important for the livestock farmers, and we are engaging with the Department of Agriculture as well as ARC to adopt such a product for operational purposes. In addition to that, we have what we call the Soil Moisture and Soil Saturation Index product. That is a suite of detailed forecast of spatial estimates of moisture and evapotranspiration. And this is estimated using a hydrological model, and this is often used for monitoring flooding as well as drought. The weather modeling based forecasting products involve products such as convective scale and sample, and this is to indicate expected extremes. And this often assists what we call in the development of probabilistic risk-based fast guess early warning systems. And the users, potential users include our own forecasters, but we also have commercial interests currently. Then there is a seamless forecast to extend extreme forecasting from day 1 to a month. So the idea here is to have a seamless forecasting system that is continuous from a day to a month. And the users that have requested this product include commercial clients such as the retail sector, but also sporting sector has requested this kind of products. And then we have hydrological products, one of which include what we call the drought propagator. And this is a tool that is used to track how drought conditions evolve over time. We know that drought propagates from agricultural, firstly from meteorological, agricultural, hydrological, up to socioeconomic. So this kind of product is important to track the transition of drought conditions. And it's a product that has important applications in water resource management, drought monitoring and prediction, as well as drought risk assessment. But the potential users are the water management agencies or authorities, as well as farmers and generally municipal colleagues. Then there is stream flow forecasts. This is useful in the management of water resources. Actually, this can be translated further to include water allocation, operations of reservoirs, future planning of water resources, including infrastructure. The product is derived from precipitation and stream flow observations, and you can see this is a typical example of how the product is operationalized within source. Then we have what we call climate elasticity of stream flow. This is an indicator that quantifies the sensitivity of stream flow to climate change, and this is mapped throughout the country and actually localized to district municipalities. Then there is precipitation concentration index. That is a tool that monitors and detects the distribution and concentration of rainfall and associated patterns. And this tool is also localized to district municipalities. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Joel Botai, for your presentation. Don't forget to log in on Slido. Let me repeat the number because we would like to see interaction there. The Slido number is 3492822. So we would like to see those questions or comments or inputs coming through. So the third speaker for this session will be Mr. Service Governor from CSIR, and we'll be talking about special information systems development to support decision making.
Thank you everybody, and know some of you are very, very disappointed that I'm not Val Munsami. And I still hugged you this morning. That's why Leo also didn't read out his CV. He would be hugely disappointed comparing my CV to Val's. But thank you, everyone. Thanks to the organizers for the sterling job. Being somebody that, at least is laughing, she knows that all the time. Being somebody that runs conferences, I know the work that goes behind the scenes, the stress and strain. It's a wonderful job. Congratulations to all of you, and also to the keynote speakers this morning. Unfortunately, you're going to hear some of the things I'm going to say kind of repetition of what they said, but the word collaboration was used a lot this morning, and collaborate or die, I think it probably will be the motto of this event for the next 3 days. Thank you to Mbulani for setting that as a key point. But from collaborating from a national to international level is very important. I think that's what NEOS is allowing us to do. Be impactful in your work. 10 years ago, I joined the CSIR from a Pan-African NGO, and the reason I was brought in here was that the manager at that time in the Earth Observation Systems IT said he has all these fantastic geniuses that are building all these wonderful systems, but nobody seems to want to use them. And can you help me to get use out of it? And I think aptly for this presentation, it is about policy and impact. And if you build systems that have policy and impact, then you're going to have somebody willing to pay for it or use it. Don't duplicate effort. Often because of limited resources, we compete with each other, and we destroy effort from other organizations. And I think most importantly, and I'm glad we spoke about the CubeSats, we have to build local expertise, and something we'll talk about. I never have a presentation outline, but because I was asked to talk about policy, and I thought I'd be very incoherent, I thought, let me just outline the presentation to remind me what I'm supposed to be speaking about. So that's the outline. Hopefully I can stick to it. So I put interesting facts and stats in the first point. The interesting to me, I don't know, Andiswa mentioned a lot of stats this morning. I'm just going to add them on. I'm a geographer. I kind of look from the perspective of the user community and how you, the experts in the space field, bring products and services that help my community. And I think upstream and downstream, throughout the entire value chain of Earth observation and the collaboration is really important. So this is an interesting slide. It was presented by Peter Rabley at Africa GIS in Abidjan last year. But the largest mapping companies, we look at that, over $20 billion. No traditional GIS remote sensing companies. You know that if you're using a smartphone, cell phone, car, get onto a Wi-Fi network anywhere, the spatial information is gathered, and they're making lots and lots of money from you being a sensor. And it's something that we need to understand, because many of us here are people from the public sector trying to solve issues for the public good, but this is a player that we kind of sometimes don't even consider. Some of the numbers, the geo market, there was mention of figures prior to this, but as I said, with the lens of mainly the GIS kind of lens, it's a $400 billion market. Currently, I think there's 57,000 satellites, or 57,000 satellites for 2029. Looking at plus, 3 billion smartphones with the GPS units on it. But we still look at Africa's share of the GIS market is 3%. 90% of people without electricity will be in Africa. And you look at 68% of the population will be urban by 2050. More importantly, by 2030, Africa will become the most populous region in the world. It's only 18 years away. We also have the youngest population in the world and the most natural resources. So food for thought in terms of what should guide us. A recent study on African space economy, I think, came out within the last few days. But just talking about the African space economy, valued at close to 20 billion and projected growth of 16%. The industry in Africa employs 19,000 odd people. African nations have allocated a total of $534 million in terms of operation space programs. A lot of it is around GNSS, and from the previous speaker, we know that it's valuable. It's around satellite TV segmentation and others, so not purely in the Earth observation remote sensing field. And as of 2022, 13 African nations have manufactured some 48 satellites, either completely independently or in partnerships with multinational or countries from the north. And there has been a huge paradigm shift, even in South Africa, perhaps, that we're focusing on small satellites rather than the large ones, because of the reduction in barriers, but also costs, and building up this expertise. Plus, it's no point in duplicating and building a satellite that pretty much provides the same information that we could get freely anyway. And 272 new space companies have been created. And I think when we spoke about public-private partnerships and developing a SMME culture, especially in South Africa, this is good news. I think the next slide is just a snapshot of that, but it kind of shows, if you look at the satellite manufacturing, remote sensing, which is red, and national budgets, that's still a very, very small slice of the pie, and it's something we need to consider, and hopefully we can expand that kind of growth going forward. It's a very interesting study. Post this session, I can provide you links to it. So some of the maybe more boring stuff is why CSIR, why am I here? CSR is a huge organization, as you would have figured out from Dr. Kaveh Naidu's presentation this morning. One time, over 2,000 people, various business units. I work in the next generation enterprises and institutions cluster, and we have a few impact areas. We also host NICIs, which is CHBC, SND, and DIRECTIVES, for some of you guys that are familiar with NICIs. So within the e-government impact area, there's 3 research groups. One is software architectures and solutions, which mainly build systems for the health department, the health patient registry systems, EDVS, all of you guys have used that for the vaccinations, and various other master facility lists for health. And they're more and more using spatial information. We have a sister research group that works on monitoring and evaluation, primarily focused on role development. And then you have my research group, spatial information systems, circled very crudely, that builds spatial information systems. And I just want to talk to you about why policy, and mainly it's because we are the e-government unit, so we're supposed to be developing e-government systems. So the main objective of the e-government impact area is to contextualize technological innovations to support the efforts of the South African government and to modernize the respective services, thereby guide the digital transformation of the public service. As I mentioned, we primarily focus on health. We build all the major health systems for South Africa, and we're looking at developing inputs into the future national NHI, which is coming very soon to all of us. The NHI system will look at capitation models, so the primary healthcare facilities and managers will get their budgets based on the threshold people. So once again, location and access is key. Spatial information is key to our future NHI. And I mentioned in the other 2 units. So for me as SIS, we're part of e-government, and we must provide these decision tools and leverage geospatial data to help government. We must utilize investment. Some of our funding comes from Department of Science and Innovation's parliamentary grant, but that's probably close to 20% of our budget. And the rest of the work that we do in products and services we create comes from contract R&D. We have to go out and work on projects, bid for work, and bid on projects. But essentially it's to design and deploy innovative locally developed spatial platforms to support South Africa. And we're one of the few groups that I think are very committed to developing the wider African continent, delivering social good and high impact. And you also mentioned it earlier, I also said quite a lot, but I know there's a lot of technical people here, but ultimately if the work that we do doesn't improve the livelihoods of the most impoverished citizens on our continent, then we really consider what we are doing. We have to make sure that we're not just here for the nice lunches and the free power bank, that the work that we do actually really makes a difference. So in terms of the methodology of what we did, I have to say when I came in, it was flipping the scenario of building cool tech and expecting somebody to use it. And that failed miserably. So the kind of methodology, and I'm using the Oceans and Coasts project that we've developed with DFFE and DSI, once again, a primary example of what collaboration can do, and also with SANZA. But essentially to say, let's take the data, which is remotely sensed feature in situ. Oceans need a lot of in situ data, model data, and in situ. Get the experts, so don't do everything yourself. Work from national to local government, involve local fishermen, work with the research organizations, work with the private sector and the national entities, and together try to access this data and then build the relevant models to solve the problems. So whether it's marine spatial planning, understanding the sea state, and we had colleagues here from SAWS talking about that, we get inputs from them as well, and then provide that information in a digestible way to the relevant authority. We often complain that decision makers don't know what we do. No, we don't know how to communicate to our decision makers well. We throw science in them and expect them, and then a little map with a north arrow, and expect them to know what we're doing. We really understood that this, like kind of dashboard information, local languages, and then, making it very customized to that user. Showing economic value, showing that, for example, so much savings could be had if we alert artisanal fishermen about weather. And putting a monetary value on that actually makes a huge impact. And as I mentioned, whatever we do from a continental, national to continental level. So once again, because this is a policy session, we refer back in our work to say, are we actually effective? So for the oceans and coast work and some of our disaster management activities, we looked at, for example, the Coastal Management Act, the Sustainable Coastal Development Act, the National Environmental Management, and then Operation Pikisa, which is very key to the oceans development. So once again, from policy to action. As I mentioned, our work goes from South Africa to Africa. So once again, and I must say, there's a few of us that have been very active in Africa for 2 decades. Africa has been at the forefront of developing geospatial policy linked to our firstly Millennium Development Goals and our SDGs for 2 decades. We had something called the Millennium Development Goals Mapper. And we actually broke down all of those categories and said, which is spatial. And there's the old mantra that 80% of information for decision making is spatial. And we kind of proved that when we unpack the MDGs and the SDGs. But we have, for example, the Geospatial Information for Sustainable Development document. It's a policy document that guides us to 2030. We have a vision for GI for sustainable development in Africa and advancing Africa's sustainable development agenda through geospatial information management. And that's the domain that we all are part of. So once again, whenever we're trying to work in Africa, we bring ourselves back to the fundamentals. Are we effectively looking at sustainable development, improving people, organizations, through the use of geospatial information? Once again, African policy, like South Africa, where we're not sure of policy. Africa too has lots of policies, but I just picked a few of the many. But we make sure that we're looking at African space policy, strategy, disaster risk reduction, the maritime strategy, illegal exploitation and trade of fauna and flora. Well, we are the biggest, the most exploited continent in terms of flora and fauna. And also then the blue economy strategies. Recently, UNEP put out strategy documents as well, and ensure, once again, alignment and aggregation to those international, continental, local policies. So a little bit about then, okay, so this guy's been talking about all these wonderful policies they're involved with. What do you actually do? It's a very short summary of some of the work. My team, and it used to be a team of 30, and I think we're now down to 5, maybe 6 people. But for the Ministry of Environment, we have built the land cover analytics tool, which is based on analytics on AWS. Azimuth is a subsidence product we had for some mining companies, but we're using it also for the DoD to measure infrastructure. It uses SAR imagery. For the National Nuclear Regulator, which is the real-time information management system, is monitoring Kuba's radiation, so the sensors, the geospatial part of it, and then alerting. And we have our big flagship projects, which is the Oceans Coastal Information Systems, which is a DFE, DSI funded project to build the National Oceans and Coast System. It has categories on harmful algal bloom, offset sea, and various others. I'm not going to go into detail. We have an exhibition booth, and we have some colleagues there who will give you the full detail. And that national project allowed us then to get involved in the African Union GMS in Africa project, where we're pretty much building oceans for every African country south of the equator. There's 40 African countries that have a coastline, and our mandate is to ensure that we support the blue economy process, prevent illegal fishing, exploitation, capacitate sustainable fishing, and fishermen by identifying potential fishing zones. So once again, through national work, it's allowed us to have a continental impact. So just a recap on what we do in terms of our RD&I, focuses on building capacity, continuous prediction, and developing operational 24/7 systems, not static. One of the paradigms that my team uses, because we're the CSR, we kind of play in between data analytics and artificial intelligence. The bread and butter of our industry is what has happened, or what is happening. The why is happening, we're kind of figuring it out even with the oceans work, why are rock lobster leaving the ocean, and then what will happen, predictive analytics, machine learning, deep learning. I think some of our scientists are here that play in that arena. And then importantly, I think this is what we're going to go to, is optimizing reinforcement learning for decision automation. So that's where we see the future of this true artificial intelligence, and that's where we want to go. But ultimately, once again, to help the decision maker to answer the question, what do I want to happen? Or also, if I don't do anything, what will happen? Like, for example, the KZN flood. So just, I think last two slides, Chair, if you can indulge me, but as I said in the earlier slide, we want to move from the static map illustrating what has happened to this predictive spatial analytics and decision automation, but it requires specialized IT skills. And I believe, when we talk to HCD and the wonderful work capacitating youth and women, in my discussions with some of the universities that are true informatics, kind of the doorway to our industry, the numbers of students that are enrolling in postgraduate studies are getting less and less and less. When we talk about all this exciting careers, why are fewer people wanting to do it? And what are we doing about it? CSR has stopped the studentship program where we fully paid for master's PhDs, and that was our pipeline, and we stopped that for various reasons. So what should we be doing? And maybe it's one of the community of practice issues for NEOS, HCD. Computational power, the cost of sustainability, access to high quality commercial expensive data. For our products and services, we need AIS data, which is $40,000 a year. We need SAR imagery at 21 million rand every 3 years. Who pays? How do we do that? Or do we build the capabilities on the continent? As I said, policy support. We're hoping in previous ICT RDR roadmap, Earth observation was a distinct pillar. Not that I'm expert of the decadal plan, but are we going to get subsumed as the Earth observation space industry? Because Earth observation is not a pillar anymore. And what will that do to funding our agencies? I think we have to protect our sovereignty. More and more multinational companies have moved from pixel to analytics, and they can come to your country and say, don't bother building an oceans ecosystem, we'll do it for you. That will destroy all our capabilities. And we have to be protective of that, and we will be cognizant of that. That's what's that saying, be wary of people bearing gifts over it. Don't take the free t-shirt. This issue about mutually beneficial PPPs, when we get involved in this North-South partnerships, make sure it's mutually beneficial and we're not getting the raw end of the deal. Something that is not a topic that we're looking at too much is the protection of personal location information. There's been a lot of hacks for personal information and ethical use of spatial data. And I think it's something that we need to look at in our industry. And importantly then, I think SA-GEO community must be supportive of the African policy. I just did a couple of screenshots. One on the recent, I think it was a few days ago, but the French government tax officials used AI, so Google and another company, to kind of spot undeclared pools, collected I think 10 million euros of tax, because in France you have to declare it. But on the flip side of that, privacy issues. So it's the issue of ethical use. There was another good slide on the Earth observation operations stack from data to applications. And sorry, it's a bit fine that we share this presentation, but you'll see more and more data providers are moving into analytics. In fact, in future, they'll move right down the value chain to applications. So what would that do to us? And it's worrying. And the last bit is that we work with the European Union through the African Union program. In the Ocean and Coast program, there's something called Mercator, and they're developing a marine strategy for Africa. The Europeans are developing the African strategy. So it's once again, our challenges. And if we're not united, as I think Umlani said, and we fragment ourselves, we're not going to have the strength to negotiate and protect ourselves. Sorry, so there's a few conclusions before I get off my high horse, but I think forging the future of South African space and technology has to be guided by continental and local priorities. Co-creation, co-investment, co-design versus a simple client service provider model is the way to go. We found that out with OSINs. we had a one-to-one investment with the client. And we built it together, and we sustained it. And it's a model that's worked. As I said, if you want to hear more about it, there's the exhibition booth. But I encourage all of you guys. That's a model that we've seen success with. Address real intangible problems, invest in, and sustain our institutions, individuals. Many of our spatial IT people are joining mainstream companies, AWS and others, leaving our field completely, but that's a worry. And yeah, as I mentioned, the upstream space sector and the downstream GIS user community and policymakers and the partnerships must continue to grow. I think the work of NEOS, SA-GEO, we have the Committee on Spatial Information as well. I think if we collaborate and work together, I think there's a lot of positives for South Africa. So thank you all, and apologies for taking more than my time.
Thank you, Mr. Governor. The last speaker for the session is Mr. Adolf Malachi. Him and I, we are from the same organization, but he is more on agricultural side of things. So he will be talking about the use of Earth observation technologies to improve natural agricultural resource assessment, monitoring, and management.
Thank you so much, Session Chair, and thanks to the organizing committee for inviting me to come and share a little bit with you. I'm going to be very brief and straight to the point, so distinguished delegates, please pay attention from the beginning, because if you don't, you'll wake up when you see the thank you slide. Okay, a little bit about me. I'm actually a soil scientist who became very interested in the use of geospatial technologies to manage the resources. And yeah, I was very fortunate. The Minister of Agriculture and Land Reform and Rural Development appointed me to serve in the UNGGIM, and that exposed me a little bit. Now, the directorate that I'm coming from is called Land and Soil Management. It used to be called Land Use and Soil Management, but due to this measure that happened recently, we are now called Land and Soil Management. It's responsible to administer two legislations. The first one is Subdivision of Agricultural Land Act, Act 70 of 1970. A lot of people, they just call it SALA. The second act, which I'm going to delve a little bit more in the subsequent slide, is called the Conservation of Agricultural Resources Act, Act 43 of 1983, and a lot of people just say CARA. All right, now, these are the areas where CARA is trying to regulate, and the first regulation is called cultivation of virgin soil. So in other words, if you have a virgin soil, you must get a permit for you to cultivate it. And the Act defines a virgin soil as a soil that was never disturbed in 10 years' time. So, and we get a lot of cases in this space. There is two farmers, farmer A and B. Farmer B decided to cultivate his field. Now farmer A is saying, oh, after he cultivated that field, now a lot of water moved into my field. And there is a problem. And then he started to investigate, did he get the permit? If he got the permit, did the department consider the impact of that cultivation on that field? Now, we do use Earth observation when we are facing with such kind of issues, where we get the imageries. At least we are fortunate because the Earth observation, you can do time series from 2022 moving back to assess if indeed the piece of land was never cultivated in the last 10 years. So that is one of those things, and we are fortunate nowadays because with these advances in technology, you can use Google Earth Engine platform, and you don't have to download those tiles anymore. So that is something that is making our life a little bit easier. The other species where the CARA is regulating is on the cultivation of virgin land. We need to protect ourselves against water and wind erosion. And there is a big issue, waterlogging and salinization, where the Act is also trying to regulate that space. You might be interested, why are we interested in salinization? You see, if our soils get more salts, then those soluble salts will increase the osmotic pressure, which will make it very hard for our plant roots to absorb the water and nutrients from the soil. And eventually, our land will become bare due to buildup of those salts. I'll talk a little bit more about this one. And a whole lot, and we have to protect our wetlands and also our rangelands. I think if you drive around in the Free State or the Northwest, it's easier for you to see that our grassland is under a serious threat due to bankrupt bush. So these are the spaces where my unit is trying to figure out how can we use Earth observation to try and assess, monitor, even encourage the land users to manage the resources. I'm going to quickly take you through one of the practices that my directorate is promoting. It's called regenerative agriculture. Other people they call it climate smart agriculture. So we view this practice as one of those practices that we can use to try and address some of those issues. And we are promoting this practice. So what are the principles of the practice? We want to see minimal disturbance of the soil. We will be happy if we can't see bare soil in our agricultural fields. The principle, one of the most important principles again, is that we want to see living roots most of the time in the year in that field. And also increase soil biodiversity and integrate life. So these are the principles of the system. So farmers are steadily adopting it, and we are trying to open up that space. If you look into this imagery here, if you look here and there, this farmer harvested soya, and then he then planted. If you can check on this row, and this one, you can see there are some green stuff coming up. So the farmer in this case, he planted this green stuff that is coming up without churning the soil. Because once you turn this soil, you are taking up carbon to the atmosphere, and that is not what we want. We want to store it in the soil. So, and if you look around, he cultivated, but the soil is well covered. So that's what we want to see. But then how is observation, or how can Earth observation assist us in this regard? One of the projects that I'm currently working on is that we need to understand the spatial footprint of this practice in South Africa, because currently there is a figure, but we want to know where exactly, so that we can derive the other benefits later on. So I'm working on this project where I'm trying to use optical data and SAR data to try and come up with the spatial footprint of where this practice is taking place. Now, the issue there is that we are working hard to just differentiate the spectral signature of the crop residue and the background soil. And that is the area that if we can get something there, we will be able to do it. All right, now, recently, I think the beginning of COVID, I also got involved in this project with the FAO guys, where we wanted to understand the extent of salt-affected soils in South Africa, and we used georeference point data. One of the variables is your pH, electrical conductivity, and exchangeable sodium percentage. So we needed this input data set of climate raster maps and your parent material maps, your geology or soil map. We also used multispectral data, the visible region, the near-infrared and shortwave infrared. And also then we use SAGA to derive these relief parameters. And of course, we also use our land cover map. I don't want to bother you a lot with this one, but I just wanted to indicate to the workflow. Here we have the point data and the predictors. Other people, they call them covariates. And then we did this input assessment and preparation, where we used LOEs when we were harmonizing or standardizing our layers so that they can have the same CRS, spatial resolution and so on, so that we can overlay them. And then this step we did the modeling, where we have to choose the learning algorithm and do the testing and validation of the model, and then we use the FAO criterion to classify as well. All right, so this is, I just thought I will share with you how we chose the learning algorithm with that, and this is the code that we put it in R, and then it took a little more time. I'm using 32 gig RAM desktop. I had to run it and then go home the following day and then just go and have a look, is it still running? And then, yeah. So it took a little bit of time for me to just get this output. And out of this output, then we were looking at these parameters, ME, RMSE, R squared, and then all the time, the indication was that the quantile random forest was performing better. But because of our computational power limitations, we then opted to use random forest. And then these are the softwares that we used. I think there is a sense that we are moving towards free and open source software. So we stick to free and open source softwares. And eventually, this is the map, and we managed to pick up areas, and then I drove to Kruger National Park to get in there. They took me around, and they indeed confirmed that there is salinity issues in that space. Well, then we now know, and when a farmer is applying to irrigate the land, we can use this kind of product to say, but hey, there is a salt problem here. But now the question is, can we use earth observation technologies to have a monitoring system for water logging and salinization? I think that is the space that we need to explore. I know a lot happened previously, but we can kind of put our heads together and come up with a system. I'm not going to talk much about rangeland, but two of my colleagues, Mochental, I think is here on this paper, and Annalisa, they worked on, and other two members, they worked on trying to utilize SAR and optical data to understand, try to understand, figure out, what happened with Stellenbosch encroachment in the Free State. So I think that's a very interesting article that you can go through. There is also a move towards using Earth observation to, have a little bit of a feel on base soil index. And I know that many people are using Earth observation to calculate things like leaf area index and chlorophyll content. So I think the future is promising. I'm a soil scientist, but I'm quite looking forward to the future with the Earth observation technologies. And I was talking with my colleague that we need to invest more in cloud computing. And we are confident that we need to learn the Python language, because at this stage we are more comfortable with R. Another area that my department is looking into, actually we bought two fixed wing drones, but it's been 2 years now, we can't fly them because there are so many issues with Civil Aviation Authority. But we are looking into getting that space so that we can have high detailed drone imageries, but eventually we want to create the synergy, models that will create the synergies between the drone imagery and the satellite imagery because of scalability issues. And we know that we can do crop type classification using Earth observation. And lastly, I'm one of the guys who are working with CSIR team on the development of the CSIR precision arc system, and Earth observation is playing a major role there. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Malati. Now we have listened to all our speakers. In terms of our time, based on what we have been allocated, we are doing well, but I guess we have to catch up, right? So then we are able to meet the end of the day time. So I must say, Slido is very active, and I try to organize some questions that are aligned together so we can save time. There's few questions which relate to space weather in terms of KZN. And I would like Professor Joel Botai to actually address the question that relates to the issues of pre and post KZN floods. And there was also another question if there were forecasts that were predicted in the future in terms of what happened in KZN. I'm not saying it as it is written because I'm trying to save our time. So I would like you to address that, Professor Botai, before I can go to another question.
You see here into reality. So under institutional improvement, the DESA platform will provide protection and preservation of the satellite imagery, provision of reliable, standardized products and services, provision of central and shared data infrastructure, so as well as under user co-created value. The DESA platform will provide timeless and easily accessible satellite imagery, as well as perform time series analysis. So for the phase of the project, the phase 2 will be delivered, that is institutional improvements and user co-created value, but the last one, innovative visualization, will form part of the second phase of the project. Okay, I thought it would be important also to share with everyone that the DESA platform, it supports innovation to solve socio-economic challenges or problems in built infrastructure. Your built infrastructure being transport infrastructure, energy infrastructure, waste infrastructure, human settlements, and more. Okay, the current status of the project. We've completed the system development, that is your hardware and software. The ARD is completed the processing. And then we've done a use case on human settlement, successfully done. And we also have a marketing strategy. Since it's a new platform, so it's very important to market it to the potential users. So we are planning to do the final launch of this platform in October. We don't have a confirmed date yet. So after that, I believe that most of the people will have access to the platform. Lastly, this is just a front end of our website. We've got a website, as I said, that the system development is completed, so we have it. It's working, so we're just waiting for the launch date to officially launch it so that the users can access the service. That's my last slide on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kobisa. I hope we fully appreciate the magnitude of what this digital South Africa is all about. I mean, we're talking about data data cube. Maybe the expression cube is even an oversimplification, because already remote sensing data, you have the spatial dimension, your X, Y, and then you have the Z dimension, which is the number of channels. And then now you have the time. So I don't know if cube is the right word. And so you're dealing with a four-dimensional matrix. And that needs quite some mathematics and data analytics. And so I think, as we bring students on board, they should understand that that is the complexity of the data that we're dealing with, and to ensure that we build a relevant capacity in the domain. But I think that's very commendable on the part of SANSA to undertake this initiative. And as I said, we would like to see many more students get into this processing of this data and the time series analysis that go with it. So thank you very much. So questions, please, again, slido.com, post all of the relevant questions. The last presenter, or one of the presenters, Dr. Josh Shirima, is not here, so we have some time to really ask all of our questions. So please post your questions on that platform. Our next presenter is Dr. Linwell Martin. He's a chief research scientist with the South African Weather Service. You're welcome on stage. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. So I'm going to spice things up a bit. You won't hear the word NEOS or space or 4IR in this presentation, but you do hear the word observation and Mercury. That's definitely going to come out a lot in this presentation. So I'm going to give an overview of the South African Mercury Network. That's a DSI-funded project that started in April 2020. So when everybody was going into lockdown, we kicked it up a notch by starting the project. And I think the progress that we've made so far has been really good, despite all the challenges that we faced. So when people think of the weather service, this is normally the picture that they have in mind. Somebody that's presenting the weather. And I really like the isiXhosa and the Zulu weather forecasters. If you haven't watched them before, please have a look. The enthusiasm and the excitement which they present the weather is really something to look forward to. So this is normally when people talk of SAWS, or when people talk of a weather organization, this is the picture that they have in mind. But SAWS is much more than this. As Professor Butai earlier alluded, we have a research department within SAWS, and so I'm not going to go into that much. But observations is key for us at the Weather Service, and within the research department, there's a unique group which is called the Global Atmosphere Watch Station, or the Global Atmosphere Watch Group, and we are located in Stellenbosch, but our laboratory is at Cape Point. And as you know, the Weather Service forms part of the WMO network, and the reasoning behind having a Global Atmosphere Watch Station is basically we look at long-term observations of greenhouse gases. So that's our main emphasis. We monitor greenhouse gases, CO2, methane, SF6, ozone, CO, all the related greenhouse gases. And we basically look at trends in background concentration, and that's very important. We're not interested in what's happening in the city. We basically look at the background concentrations. And the importance of the GEO stations is really highlighted in this slide, as the data which we collect are then used for the greenhouse gas bulletin, the WMO published every year in October. Certain graphs which you will see in IPCC reports is based on data from Cape Point, so it definitely has an effect on the international scale as well. So just a bit more about the Global Atmosphere Watch. So it forms part of the WMO network. There's about 31 stations globally, only 31 globally. And there's 3 in Africa, 3 located on the African continent. And the Cape Point station was established in 1978, where we started with our first measurement of CO. And this is just a schematic graph of all the global atmosphere watch stations within the network. So I mentioned earlier that we are unique, and this is the reason why. So twice a week we go to the station when some of you are sitting in your office looking at buildings or I don't know, whatever you're looking at. This is where I spend most of my time. So whoever has visited Cape Point before, you've probably seen the tower. So our intake line is on the tower and the laboratory is just located over there. For those of you who haven't had the time yet, I'll just give you a few more seconds just to take that in, and then I'll continue. So I mean, we are really very fortunate to have such a beautiful location, especially during lockdown. We are a very small team, but we were putting up our hands because we just wanted to get out of the house, enjoy the drive around Fischhoek and Museumburg, so the scenery is really lovely. Okay, back to business again. So the data of Cape Point, as I mentioned earlier, especially the greenhouse gas data, is then sent to the World Data Center for Greenhouse Gases. Locally, our data is also sent to the South African Air Quality Information System, SAR-GEO, and it speaks to different international conventions like the Montreal Protocol, the Kyoto Protocol, and also the data is used in IPCC reports as mentioned earlier. So, coming back to mercury. So, I don't want to go into much detail, but in the atmosphere there's a lot going on, and you can basically find 3 species of mercury in the atmosphere. The gaseous elemental mercury is the form that's mostly found in the atmosphere. And the reason mercury is called a global pollutant is because of the residence time, especially of gaseous elemental mercury. So it can be transported from South Africa to India or wherever. It stays in the atmosphere for about 6 to 9 months before it is deposited to the soil or into rivers through either wet or dry deposition. The other 2 species, residence times is much shorter, so the effect is seen more locally. Why the importance of looking and monitoring mercury? Mercury is what is known as a neurotoxin. Although it does have a lot of benefits, it's also very harmful, and especially for us as humans. The one thing unique about mercury is once it is emitted into the atmosphere, you can't get rid of it. It just goes through the normal cycle, and eventually it ends up in the food chain, and especially fish, and then ultimately once we eat it, it bioaccumulates in our bodies, and then we can get sick. And some people have even died before that. So that's why it's important that we do monitor mercury. So in terms of observations, and there's the word observations, the 2019 report of UNEP highlighted all the countries and stations monitoring mercury. And as you can see, if you look at from north to south, in the northern hemisphere, a lot of observations is ongoing. In the southern hemisphere, not so much. To give you a more realistic picture of active mercury sampling, this is actually a true picture of what is going on. And if we focus on Africa, you will see we've got 1 dot there at the bottom, which is Cape Point, and for the rest of Africa, nothing. There's really nothing going on. That's basically the picture it was before we started the SAM-GEO. We've got a whole continent. Mercury pollution is a big issue for Africa, especially with SA-GEO being one of the main drivers for that. And we've only got 1 station that actually monitors mercury continuously. Okay. So to come back to the source mercury monitoring program, so we started monitoring mercury in 1995 at Cape Point. Currently the Cape Point dataset is the longest dataset in the southern hemisphere. We've also started with wet deposition sampling, that's basically mercury monitoring in rainwater. And out of this project, over 25 publication has been published, and also the Cape Point data is is always used in the global models. So coming to the South African Mercury Network. So SAMNet was established in April 2020, as I've mentioned, and it's a 2.5-year project, finishing the end of this year, and it's a DSI-funded project. And the overall goal was to develop a coordinated and later move up into Africa observation network for mercury, determining the status and trends in atmospheric mercury, and also very important to provide input as South Africa is a signatory towards the Minamata Convention on Mercury in terms of policy, but also support the global observation system for mercury, that is the GeoFlags program, by making the data of Cape Point available freely in the GEO community. So from Cape Point, which was the only station that we've had, through this project we were able to establish stations in Springbok, the R, Witbank. Oh, I didn't press it. So we've been able to expand the observation network of mercury in South Africa, and also recently on the 1st of July we established another station in Springbok. We will do some passive sampling as well. Through this network we were also able to establish a passive sampling network in 6 out of the 9 provinces, and we were also doing some monitoring with Eskom at Medupi, Welgegoed, Kimberley, and also in UKZN. In terms of the project, we also have a HCD component for mercury, and these are the following students at Northwest, UP, CPUT, VUT, and so all of the projects which they are focusing on is linked with mercury, either fully or partially. The project will focus. So we've got about 2 PhD students and then 6 MSc students that is doing a project related on mercury observations as part of the SAMNet project. We were also fortunate recently to start monitoring on board the SA-GEO that went down to Antarctica as part of the winter cruise. So my colleague Casper, he's in the picture there with the green hat there, the long guy there, the tall guy there. He went on the cruise, he looked after our instrument. And so the ship basically follows the purple line down to the ice in Antarctica. And for the first time through the SAMNet project, we were able to do mercury observations over the ocean, in the Southern Ocean, that has never been done before. And it's basically through the support, and funding that we got for this project from DSI. And so I want to say nobody in the world can produce this graph. This is the data which was collected through this. So it's the first time for Africa that we do something like this. Yes! So over the ocean, in the land, we definitely are expanding our monitoring capabilities. In terms of the stakeholders, and this message came strongly out this morning, we've realized in SAMNet that we can't do this alone. And I think that's probably one of the take-home messages for each of us. We've got SASOL, Eskom involved, the Medical Research Council, we've got different universities involved, we've got obviously the DSI is involved, and DFFE. So all these different stakeholders are playing a part in the South African Mercury Network. Then, as I mentioned earlier, the idea for phase 1 was just to focus on Africa, or just to focus on South Africa and try to establish the network, but things have really gone really good for us, and we've been able to make inroads into Africa as well. Those blue dots which you see on the screen is part of an international global passive sampling network that is covered by the Environment and Climate Change Canada. They are supporting those countries, but through SAMNet we were able to also establish new sites in Africa. We were able, that started in July, so we've got now sites in Namibia, Ghana, Botswana, Kenya, and Tanzania. And hopefully through this first phase we will be able to try and see if we can't fill in the gaps Africa has been identified as a data scarce region, especially for mercury observation. So hopefully through this SAMNet network and initiative, we will be able to try and fill in the gaps. So it's nice to have these instruments and these sites, but what can we do with the data at the end? Because having the data and writing papers is not good enough anymore. So basically through the data, we were able to increase the data accessibility, but also be able to identify gaps, strengthen and weakness of the current status. But basically, it comes down to filling in the gaps. And that is important, and we've seen that through SAMNet that we are able to do this, and also provide a platform to develop products and support science questions. Out of the, if I'm not mistaken, out of the 54 African countries, 39 countries has ratified the Minamata Convention on Mercury. And out of that 39 countries, only South Africa has a mercury monitoring program that is active. So we are basically the leaders when it comes to mercury monitoring, and hopefully we will be able to share this knowledge and the experience that we have gained through SAMNet with our African colleagues. The important thing about, as I've mentioned earlier, the Global Observation System for Mercury, which is a GeoFlagship program, is that through this GeoFlagship program, there is a knowledge hub. So basically all the stations and all the monitoring networks that is part of GOS4M, the data is sent through this knowledge hub, and where different policy scenarios and assessment can be done, especially for countries that's got no monitoring activities or no monitoring experience. We can design policy questions, and we can assist them through this knowledge hub in providing them guidelines and guidance into developing a monitoring strategy for their country. So in terms of the data, there's definitely value added through this knowledge hub platform. Again, as I go to the conclusion, the most important thing about SAMNet, and especially the mercury data that we gather through our network in South Africa, is that we can assist especially the Department of Fisheries, Forestry and Environment, as they are the focal point for South Africa in terms of the Minamata Convention. Two of the articles in the convention speaks to mercury monitoring, observation, and also the effectiveness evaluation of the convention. South Africa has signed the treaty. They have agreed to implementing certain rules and regulations, and through the monitoring, we will be able to see if the convention is actually working. Air has been identified as one of the matrices or media which the convention, the convention effectiveness can be judged. So in terms of that, we are definitely ahead of the game, as we've got an active air monitoring network going in South Africa. In terms of the network, basically the idea is that we start to fill in the gaps in Africa through our SA-GEO networks, where we've got SAMNet there, and through this new content we've been able to build, have North Africa, East Africa, West Africa, and ultimately have the first coordinated continental mercury network in the world that can basically supply and provide data for the global observation system for mercury. And again, I just want to thank our funders, DSI, for this, as we are definitely making mercury history on the African continent through this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. And I think I particularly like the broader perspective, filling in the gaps within the continent. But at the same time, when I hear about accumulation of mercury in our fish, I love fish, it's a bit frightening there. And I hope we also have colleagues who are interested in developing portable sensors. So maybe this evening, if I had a sensor that I can put on my fish and I get tick, then I know this one I shouldn't eat it. So I think those handheld portable sensors are required in most of the things that we are developing.
Taking you through how we have used imagery services for census projects. But before I take you through, the main thing of the house is the Earth observation, is the space agency, is the science of the science and innovations. But satellites, they don't detect the population variables or quality of life of people. Or do they even sense how people are feeling or their miseries that they are on? And that is where we come in as Statistics South Africa to come and collect the population variables, but directed by the satellites. I wanted to say hallelujah. So, because then they don't detect, we come in as the SA going into these places that the satellite detects, and we sit with the people that we want to solve their problems. We talk to them, they disclose to us, we go and process data, then we come with the statuses that will help us to solve these problems. But it starts, of course, from the satellites. So we are Statistics South Africa, and I just wanted to just put that picture right there, that the picture doesn't just look good. So this is our building. You are welcome to visit if you are interested in knowing further about the presentation that I'm going to do. So I'm going to take you through the imagery services, census planning, and how we have gone about implementing it. So who are we? So we are not just going without being sent. We are sent by the government of South Africa. We are mandated to go out and collect data, produce statistics, and of course disseminate it. But we also coordinate to those who would want to be releasing statistics. Then we help them with our systems, our methodologies, and with the authority that we have. But we are also directed by the strategy of the organization, Status A, which its core function or its core vision is to improving lives through data ecosystems. So of course, the satellite's imagery data set is important because then it helps in achieving our vision and a mission as an organization. So we also lead in partner quality statistics. Why do we need statistics? Because of course we want it to help us bring the evidence, to have an evidence-based decision. We don't just decide that we are going to deploy the emergency or the health services in a certain area. We really have to have stats of that area and what are the kind of health services that they would need, and we deploy. So I'll just quickly pass through this, and that, yes, as I've said, within Status A, there's a geography department, which is under the Chief Directorate of the Geographic Frames and Spatial Data. So what we are responsible of is we geo-reference the statistic frame in the form of geospatial frame. So you will understand what is a geospatial frame as I proceed with my presentation. So what we are doing, we've got the address layer that we use that consists of the dwelling unit structures. And what are those dwelling unit structures? They are your houses that you stay in. So we geocode your house where you stay in using the satellite imagery and ensure that we direct your field worker to the exact X and Y location of your house. It may be that it's during census or your house is sample. So when the field worker is at your gate, the field worker is not lost. These are the processes that happen with geocode and make sure that they go to the correct sample dwelling unit, sampled address to collect this data, which might be yours. So you really have to attend to them. So we also create these units. Maybe you might have observed that as you drive through in your street during census, you'll see another people on the other street, another people on the street, because we create the survey units so that they do not go into the same area or go into an area where somebody has gone already. So everyone works in their own unit, which we call it the enumeration area, and we maintain the spatial boundaries every time before we release anyone going to the field. So we also work with the PSUs. PSUs are the merged polygons, more than two, that are merged during the sampled surveys, not during this big census survey. So we also create the spatial boundaries of the small area layer, place names for dissemination of data. So we don't just receive imagery, we really need to plan how do we get the imagery. So we plan around before we deploy for census projects. We update our frames, we use the imagery services, and we also direct the logistics and operations with those spatial boundaries, because they get to determine how many field workers are we going to be deployed based on how many units have we created. And we also use the imagery during enumeration. During enumeration is when the project is on. We use the imagery for monitoring purposes and also to continuously update the frame. So this, I also want to take you through the pre-planning. As geography department within states, what we do, we also interact with the stakeholders internally and externally. And that is where we need the expertise of imagery, because as States SA, we are not, that is not our core function, it's not our mandate to be building satellites and deploying satellites so that they can acquire imagery for us. So that's where we depend on the National Space Agency, Earth observations, the service providers for imagery, the custodians of the imagery data sets, so that they can come in, then we collaborate. The first speaker has spoken that if you don't collaborate, then you perish. So what we do, we collaborate to ensure that we are able to create our frames, maintain it, and be able to use it also to monitor. So we also customize, in the process of planning, we customize our mobile applications and the web applications, and we also do the imagery connections, imagery governance, because when we get this service providers who help us with imagery data sets, I'm just going to mention them as time goes on. We have to connect the imageries to all those web and mobile services so that they help us as an input layers when we're creating, when we're maintaining, when we're quality assuring the frame. We also do software connections and do spatial frame update. And we also train from national to provincial, then to district level, ensuring that the people we are sending, they understand the use of imagery. How do they then implement the visual image interpretation skills from remote sensing, because some of them, they have not yet studied it at school. Maybe they've got grade 12, we are bringing them in to help us during data collection. So we train them, make them understand what is, when you see imagery like that, do not panic, this is what it means, and this is what you should do. So we have deployed the 3 modes of data collections. Like I've just said in the beginning, we have done CAPI, CAWI, and CATI, and this was our first digital census where we have just done our first web interviews, where people will just receive a link, then they click the link, then they take their own interviews at the comfort of their own house without anyone asking them questions that are comfortable, like how much do you get paid, what's your salary range. So I think we're just gonna go on doing those kind of deployments so that then we match up to this 4th industrial revolution and matching up to the technology and doing away with paper. And there were phone calls, those that didn't have smartphones and who didn't want people to come to their house, they would call in and we help them take through the survey. And of course, also depending on the imagery, because you don't just say you're calling from where I have to detect your location on these applications and make sure that I pin you exactly to the place where you are, so that during analysis and the publishing of data, your data is at the location where you stay, because that's what matters in planning and development. So yes, most importantly, the imagery services that we're using. So we were using the Esri platform. They'll give you the customized base map, and in that we had to include the other base maps that we have received through our service provider, which is the Secure Watch, MEXA, and the vivid layer. So we were predominantly using those two layers to update our frame, to monitor and continue update during data collection. So in those, I'll just specifically cite those two because we were predominantly using them. So the standard secure watch imagery, the good part about it is that it is most recent. It is like 3 months old. Like you get a tile replacement after the satellite has captured that tile, you get it. So possibilities are that you're going to get the developments as they're happening in the ground, though are not that much live, but you still get those developments. And I'm telling you, even as I'm speaking now, there's someone who won a lottery, who has bought a land, who is deployed, who is building so many houses in a vacant land. There are some people who have heard a speech from one of our speakers in Parliament who are going to just grab the land and just mushroom an area. And as such, we really need to follow where people are because we want to solve the problems that they are experiencing where they are. So we need to update the frame. So we follow up and make sure that we don't miss anyone out. Either they are formally located or informally located, for the fact that they are human, their problems still remain and we really need to solve them. So we use such kind of imagery to quickly update in those areas like Lowly in Johannesburg, Atteridgeville going to Pumlong, those kind of areas. So we ensure that we quickly update this. And another informal settlement that just started now during COVID, and it's called COVID in the Western Cape. It's moving very fast. So we follow up those areas using satellite imagery and ensure that we update so that when the survey comes, those people, they don't get missed, they don't get left out. So that is important. So we also use the vivid. The vivid is the pen-sharpened of the satellite imagery tiles. And so it's cloud-free mostly, it's same color, there isn't black and white on that, and the mosaic is 1 year old. So when you're using Secure Watch and you find that perhaps it's black and white or it's cloudy, then you can switch to the vivid. And that's how we were toggling between these two imagery when we were preparing the frame and during connection. And you can see the difference on that, the top one, you can see that it shows they're like RDPs. If you can just focus on this RDPs, they are on the first top picture. It seems like everything is filled up, right? Because these most recent pictures. But on the bottom one, you could see that some were still on the foundation to show that that one is a mosaic. It's a year old. So whenever they update, then for sure it's gonna catch up after a year. But you can see the tone of the picture, and so it's different in the color, of course. So the other difference as well, if you can check, this is Durban. I wanted to say those who have not been to Durban, then this is Durban just after Ushaka Marine. So in that picture there, you can see the first one is Secure Watch, and you can see that the tiles of the satellites are visible on that. It's not pen sharpened, it's not auto-rectified. So you can see the tiles, but it's of the same place, but you can see the image satellite tiles stacked on top of each other there, and the other one is black and white and show the cloud coverage. But if you can check the vivid one, it's clear, and it is, then that's where we use to switch on and off so that we continue to update the frame. So of course, we are living in South Africa. You cannot just, there's something that you cannot change, like the landscape. So those are the challenges that we would face when we are updating the frame. Then how do you get to deal with such kind when, because our main priority is where people live. That structure, it doesn't matter the shape, the size, that structure is very much important. In the office, I must be able to detect that this is a yard or these are structures. Even if I can just quantify them using my visual image interpretation skills, we need to include it and make sure that it's included on the frame. So there are situations like that where you really need to work around and see how do I subdivide this area, making sure that it's an accurate fieldwork unit. But we'll get there on the next slides. So this is what we do. Instead of creating the big fieldwork unit, we section that fieldwork unit and group structures in a group of 10 and put one geopoint so that at least it's not clustered, and just so that we don't miss those that we couldn't see during the office update. So those yellow boundaries you see, they're called sections, and of course the points you're seeing is geopoints. So another thing is that the satellite imagery is not as the aerial photo. If you can check on all the 4 pictures, it's of the same area, but if you can check the angle in which the camera was taking is different angles, and sometimes it is not easy when you are drawing boundaries. You might end up, when you are using the other image, the line or the polyline might cut on top of structure. Now it's a question of which polygon does this structure fall on. So we come across those things, and we know that the camera was not at 90 degrees nadir, it was maybe 30% off nadir. So we understand this imagery from the satellite imagery, from the drone imagery that was mounted on an airplane. So we're working with such kind of knowledge to ensure that our frame remains the same, the lines are passing through the exit place which they are passing from. So when we are using this imagery, we also have to govern their use and make sure that they are not overused or misused. So this is what we use to check the governance. How much have we consumed from the service provider? Because we are streaming this imagery live. They're not sitting in our servers or maybe from the computer. We are streaming them from online straight. So we use data to consume or to stream, to browse, and also to download. So we use this kind of graphs to monitor the use. Is this use going to take us to the end of the project? Do we have to pump more data so that it doesn't have to disturb the project while the project isn't? So with these data sets, as say, what we use the imagery for, we create frames. If you can check, this is the hierarchy of the frames. And the first one, the first 3, they are from the MDB. So we use them as our input data, so that when we are creating this frame, we create them within the boundaries of the district, so that we don't diverge. Then we create what we call main places. But for this census project that we went to, our main things was the district census coordinator, which within it we have to have field operations officers, we have to have supervisors, we have to have field workers and geopoints. So I'm getting the signal from the chair, so I'm just going to wrap up. So these are the fieldwork units that we work in, which is the hierarchy starts with geopoints. From the geopoints, we create sections. After we have done the update of that, we make sure that the fieldwork units are ready. Then we create we dissolve the fieldwork units to a supervisor unit. And then from the supervisor unit, we dissolve those units to an FOO. Within the district unit, we dissolve those, then it becomes the district unit, depending on the dwelling unit count within that. So this is the picture I was talking about. I'm sure you're familiar with it. And monitoring, this is what I was talking about. If you can check on that picture, there are structures that do not have geopoints. Why? Because they were happening while we have already submitted the frame for planning. So we really need to update while in the field, ensuring that those guys are not left behind. So we were just speaking about forging the future for South African space science technology. So our problem remains of that we need budgeting, because we are actually financed on bigger projects like census. But our frame update, it happens every day while we are sitting in our office. We're updating the frame, making sure that it gets ready during the project. So our problem is budgeting, funding, and the frequency of update as well. So I'm glad that Alex, we've spoken earlier on and said is about to release something that will be releasing imagery sooner than 3 months old. So I think there we will be covered. So how can us, the sensor and the Earth observation contribute to the mandate and the core functions of Status A? So I'm going to leave this question to the House and to those that be. because we really need your help. Our job doesn't stop. Either we have imagery or not, we really have to be updating. And sometimes we are found under pressure when the projects are in, then we have to, now that we're funding, we have to then update lots of work that we have not been updating because of the absence of imagery. So we don't want to observe, then we get the system later, then we are following after. We want to be pro or in line with what the satellite is observing. So with that said, thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Ms. Miranda. That is really a succinct application of observation data. I think it's time we should face the panelists with our questions, and we would start with the very first presenter, Prof. Berger. I think there's an interesting question for you here. How high can the unmanned aircraft fly, and what are the requirements to fly and on a UAV in South Africa, and which areas have you flown with the aircraft? I think in answering that question, you probably solved most of our problems, those who are using drones in the hall here. Thanks.
Because of the funding, the project happened mostly in the US and the UAE, and that question almost derailed the whole project. So the complexities of flying these small planes are enormous. And while we were in the UAE, there was that incident where UAVs were used as a terrorist weapon. So the question was very difficult. We couldn't get to the extremes of the aircraft. That was the limiting factor were the legal regulations. So I see South Africa as a potential place for us to host these kind of experiments, because we seem to have a little bit more leeway in South Africa. So hopefully in the future we can keep it like that. There's a scope for research, and then these kind of projects can happen in a safer environment.
Thanks very much. Let us go to Kobisa with Digital Earth Africa. You have questions like, why are you pushing the launch? If you hesitate, then we'll go to the next.
So there is gaps, but there is also, I'm amazed how many young people there are, and everybody has PhDs. So I think we are filling those gaps. For me, the important missing thing is taking these fancy technologies and making it into real-world solutions. And there's some soft skills and some skills that maybe not technical, it's not maybe in this room, that we need to bring in to make sure that technology actually solves problems.
Packaging our stuff into products and services. Kobisa?
Sorry, I just want to make sure. So the question is, what is the most important skill gap in our area?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Specifically for the DESA project, it's software developers, which I think it's not only a DESA issue or SANSA issue, it's just a countrywide issue, which sometimes it causes delays in the project. That's the key one that I mentioned.
Thanks. Lynn Will?
Oh yes, I can relate to her as well.
Okay.
In the directorate where I work in, the most gap is on the developers for the geospatial. And whenever we need such, we need to source out. But yeah, we need such kind of skills within and permanently available. And perhaps on the organizational level, is the gap is the whole organization just to understand the importance of the geospatial in terms of supporting these populations and statistics. So the buy-in from the entire organization, because they don't understand it, they don't know it, so we must keep educating them and ensure that they're brought in to ensure that, because the technologies are very expensive and all that, so when they do not know and you say 10 million imagery, there's like, don't have that money. So there's that gap knowledge as well broadly within the organization, so other than just the directorate.
Thanks. Lastly, Dr. Martin.
Yeah, I would say the next generation of atmospheric researchers and meteorologists needs to come through. If you look at university level, it's only the University of Pretoria that offers a course for people basically to start with weather and meteorology. And also, atmospheric chemistry is not a popular subject or something that people normally go through or want to study. So I would say that's the biggest obstacle for us in this field.
Thanks. With that, ladies and gentlemen, can we give our panelists a rousing round of applause? And it's exactly 16:00. I wouldn't want to stand between you and the nice Gina that this is ready for us. Thanks.
To the moderator.
Clearly, I'm the one who's going to stand between you and the receptionist. So, a moment of silence, please. Hey, you guys actually listen to me. I like this. Maybe I can keep you for longer. Thank you so much to our panelists for the knowledge, for making us jealous about Sea Point. Don't like that very much. Please, can we have the gifts to say thank you for their hard work? Once the gifts have been handed out, you're welcome to join us for a welcome reception. It will be held in the exhibition room. And it's an opportunity for you to network, share more ideas, and for those that need it to hug all your colleagues that you haven't seen in a while. Thank you.